Chapter 18. Hunter Davis. Okay, so contrary to popular belief, I wasn't an idiot. I knew kissing Skylar didn't exactly make me 100% straight. It was something I thought of often whenever I was with Lavinia, and she just stopped doing it for me. A large part of me knew it was because of her hideous attitude, but aside from that, none of the other girls caught my attention either. Not even girls as hot as Kelly or Christiane did anything for me. I felt more than I have in my entire life, watching Skylar on his knees in front of that guy, than I have in my entire high school existence, which was saying a lot. I sighed, rolling onto my side, the cool sheets crumpling beneath me as I stared at the posters on the wall. They were images of famous NFL players frozen in moments of glory. Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and Odell Beckham Jr. were all there, larger than life. I wished I could be one of them, just for a day. That was all that mattered anyway. Aside from making things right with Skylar, I had to make it to the NFL, and if I had to make sacrifices, then so be it. Like Skylar said, this meant nothing. We were just fooling around. I didn't have any qualms about it anymore, and I had no idea why I overreacted so much growing up. Maybe it wasn't so much the fact that Skylar was gay, it was that I didn't know what I was at the time. Sure, Lavinia was hot, but as I grew older I realized that I appreciated the way she looked almost objectively, and that I wasn't actually attracted to her. "Hunter, breakfast is ready," my dad called from the kitchen. "Coming." I rolled out of bed, grabbed my duffel bag, and headed out there. I had a busy day planned with school and practice after school. It would be the first one since we lost the game I knew Coach was going to run us ragged. Everything Skylar said was right. I was sloppy, disorientated. The team didn't deserve to be led by such a hot mess. "Grits and eggs," my dad said, sliding the plate over to me. I dug in immediately, barely pausing to take a breath while my father watched me. "So, Skylar's back." I nodded, shoveling food into my mouth. "Yeah, he just came out of nowhere. Coach said he recruited him at Edgewater, and the rest, as they say, is history." "Did he talk to you about Edgewater?" my dad asked. "No, we haven't. We lost the game. Well, you saw it. Everything's been crazy since then." My dad nodded. "I'm glad he's safe. Do you think you can get him to come over again? I'd like to speak to him again." He cleared his throat. "To apologize, properly." I thought back on what Mo said about my dad having something to do with Skylar being sent to Edgewater and wondered if it was true. No, it couldn't be. My dad loved Skylar. He would never be the reason he was sent away. Then again, I didn't know. Everything that happened back then was still foggy to me. "Dad," I said, but then the buzzer on my phone went off signaling I'd be late if I didn't leave now. "Yeah. Never mind. I'll see you after school." I grabbed my stuff and headed out the door. Damn it, I should have just asked him. I felt like a coward avoiding it, but a part of me didn't want to know. If my dad was involved, then Skylar would hate him, hate us both. My shoulders slumped, but I hurried to catch the bus to school. I zipped through my classes, barely paying attention as the day dragged on. My mind was already on the field, replaying the scrimmages Coach had us running, my muscles still slightly burning from the effort. Practice had been brutal, but I wanted to talk to Skylar, and that kept me going. After the final bell, I headed straight for the locker room, leaning against the wall as I waited. The minutes ticked by, but eventually, I saw him rounding the corner, his hair still damp from the shower, looking as cool and unbothered as ever. But before I could call out to him, a lady in a crisp navy suit approached him. She was tall, with sharp features, wavy blonde hair, and the way she moved made it clear she wasn't just another student or teacher. I frowned, inching closer, my curiosity piqued. Who was she, and what did she want with Skylar? "Don't come here again," I heard Skylar hiss at her. She straightened, smoothing out her navy blazer before she turned and walked away. I approached Skylar, noticing how his hands were curled into fists and his jaw looked tight. "Hey." His eyes flickered to mine before they glanced away. "What? Are you busy? I thought we could." "I'm busy." He threw his duffel bag over his shoulder and walked away from me. I frowned, staring after him. What was that? I stood there for a second and then went after him. "Hey," I called again. "Can we talk? I thought—" "No, we can't talk, Hunter. I have stuff to do, homework and whatever. Why don't you talk to your other friends?" He spat the word friends. "I want to talk to you," I replied stubbornly. "I have homework too. Why don't you come over and do it with me?" Skylar's mouth twitched, but he stopped walking and turned to face me. "You want to do our homework together?" I felt my face warm. I knew most students used it as an excuse to hook up, but that wasn't— we weren't doing that, unless that's what Skylar wanted. I honestly just wanted to play a game with him, so he could tell me exactly what I was doing wrong on the field, so that I could fix it. But studying is cool too. We could play some other time. "Yeah," I said. "Like we used to?" Skylar snorted a laugh and looked away. "Wow, you are clueless." My brow pinched. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," Skylar muttered. "Anyway, you're lying. You don't want to study." "How do you know I'm lying?" "Your brow always creases when you lie, it's—" Skylar huffs and shakes his head. "Anyway, what did you really want to do?" I perked up immediately. "We can play a game. You can tell me what I'm doing wrong. I think everything you said was right, and I just need to get my head on straight so I could play properly during the next game." "So you want me to be your tutor? What makes you think I have time for that?" "Not tutor, just help me out. You're always saying that I'm a garbage player. Now you can show me exactly what I'm doing wrong and how to fix it." Skylar regarded me and then shrugged. It was then I noticed he was wearing a black graphic t-shirt and his baggy jeans were hung low on his hips. His nose ring glinted in the sunlight. I had never noticed how strange his eyes were, like crescent moons, hooded and alluring. My gaze flickers to his thin lips, remembering the kiss we'd shared a few hours ago. I tore my gaze away, feeling flustered. "So, are you in?" Skylar's lips tugged into a smirk. "Sure, Davis. Let's head to the field." The football field stretched out before us, bathed in the warm colors of the sunset. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, the pitiless white circle now an angry orange, the yard lines casting long shadows across the turf. Skylar and I dropped our duffel bags near the sideline, ready to work. Skylar pulled out a football, and I got into position, trying to remember everything I'd been taught. But as I lifted my arm to throw, Skylar stepped in behind me, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. "Hold on," he said. "Your grip's too tight." He adjusted my hand on the ball, his large fingers guiding mine. "Loosen up a bit," he said. "You want the ball to roll off your fingers, not stick to them." I nodded, trying to relax, but my elbow was still too low. Skylar noticed right away. "Raise your elbow," he instructed, his hand gently pushing it up. "If it's too low, the ball's going to wobble. You need to keep it steady for a clean spiral." "Okay." With Skylar so close, it was hard to focus, but I did my best. He adjusted my stance next, moving my feet slightly apart. "You're standing too narrow," he pointed out. "You need a solid base so you can throw with power." Finally, Skylar stepped back, giving me some space. "Now, take a deep breath and aim for the end zone," he instructed. I did as he said, feeling the difference immediately. The ball felt lighter in my hand, my arm moved more smoothly, and when I threw it, the spiral was perfect. The football sailed through the air, hitting the target right in the end zone. "Much better," he said. "Again." We tried for a few more throws, then Skylar ran over and did his best to catch them. I felt exhilarated on the field, and with a little more practice, I knew things would be slightly better. "All right, let's call it quits." I collapsed onto the ground, staring up at the sky. Skylar sat down beside me, his elbows on his knees. He took out a smoke, his face pensive. There was so much about him that I still didn't know, that I needed to know. 2 years had passed between us, but it felt more and more like 2 lifetimes. Skylar was just so different. I didn't know where I fit in with his life anymore, and it made my chest pang with guilt, because it didn't have to be this way. We could have remained the best of friends and then brothers when my father finally adopted him. Staring, Skylar muttered. "Oh." I felt the blood rush to my face. "Sorry. I can't get over how different you look." Skylar's jaw tightened. We lapsed into silence, and I didn't want to use it as an excuse to leave, so I spoke again. "Who was the woman?" "Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answer to?" "Well, what? I don't know who she is." "You're best friends with Mason, right?" Skylar snorted. "I'm sure you've met her." "Mason?" My brows furrowed. "No, I've never seen her before." Skylar scoffed, then stared down at me. "Evelyn Grant, the superintendent at Edgewater." My eyes widened. "You know the superintendent?" Skylar turned his face away, avoiding my eyes. "How? And what was she doing here?" "Probably meeting with Coach." He flicked his cigarette away. "I don't care." A lie. I frowned, staring at him. Skylar could tell whenever I was lying, but so could I. She was there to see him. The question was why. What does Jack's mistress have to do with Skylar? I wondered what would have happened if Mason saw her. I knew he hated her to the bone. She was the reason his father hated Mason's mother and drove a wedge between their families. I'd have to figure out what happened between them from Mason, since Skylar obviously didn't want to say anything. "Oh, okay." I felt Skylar's eyes rake across my body, and I realized my shirt had ridden up to expose my six-pack, the V-cut of my stomach disappearing beneath my underwear and jeans. "So, if you didn't screw Lavinia, who did you sleep with?" I bit my lower lip, turning my head away. It would be catastrophic if this got out, but I knew Skylar wouldn't tell anyone, so I had no qualms about telling him. "Nobody." Skylar snorted. "Bull." I shrugged. That stuff never appealed to me to begin with. When I was younger, I had been desperate to be one of the guys, but as I grew up, I realized it didn't matter all that much. Lavinia looked amazing, but I wasn't attracted to her. She didn't make my heart race. She didn't make me feel much of anything. "So, you're a virgin?" "Something like that," I replied, then placed a hand over my chest. It never bothered me, and it's not like I'm saving myself or anything. It just never seemed like the right time or the right person. Skylar's jaw worked. "Then why did you kiss me? Have you kissed other guys?" "No." I took a shaky breath. "I kissed you because I wanted to, and because we made a deal. You won't interfere with Mason on the field, and we can take them down some other way." "We," Skylar scoffed. "You say that like you aren't one of them." "I'm not," I replied, irritation sparking in me. I knew Skylar always thought I was just because I hung out with them, but I wasn't. I'm not like them. Skylar lay down beside me, staring up at the stars. "You are the worst of their kind because you think you aren't like them." "I'm not." "You are," Skylar replied, his face blank. "And I couldn't care less. Do whatever you want, Hunter. It has nothing to do with me." The words stabbed at my heart for some reason, but I stamped it down. It's fine. I have a long way to go before I can make it up to him." His broad shoulder almost brushed against mine, and I felt my face heating. Being next to him now felt so freaking weird, and I didn't understand why he was so dorky as a kid, and now my body was reacting to him in such a strange way. "How did you know you were gay?" Skylar leaned over me, his face mere inches from mine. "You don't want me to answer that?" My mouth twitched. Yeah. He breathed, his hand fanned over my chest, running along my firm pecs and stopping to dip into my clavicle. A shiver rolled through me, and I felt stupid for asking such a dumb question. I saw the magazines in his room, and I knew what he was reading. "Sports Illustrated, eh?" I teased. "But for men." "Got me shooting rockets every night," Skylar chuckled. "No wonder there seemed to be an unhealthy amount of toilet paper in our cabin," I replied, grinning up at him. Skylar replied. "The story of my life. I'm surprised I didn't walk in on you during those times." "Me too," Skylar replied. "I was so ready to go back then I was beating my meat almost every night, almost like I wanted to teach it a lesson." "Gross," I wrinkled my nose. "Not as gross as you slobbering over those Baywatch girls. I swear I had 'I'm always here' stuck in my head for over a century. Their boobs were bouncing so much I thought I'd die of nausea." "Please, dickwad, don't act like you weren't slobbering over the guys too." I laughed at his disgusted expression. I have no idea why my dad kept those old tapes lying around. "Remember when we snuck into the basement to watch them on repeat?" Skylar laughed. "Fuck, man. We were so scared of getting caught, I thought for sure we would. I was clutching the blanket all night, trying so hard not to get hard, but at the same time worried you were getting hard too. Crazy. So you're telling me we missed out on jerking each other off back then? Pity." "My thoughts exactly," Skylar echoed. "But I'm sure we can rectify that now. You remember Halloween? 3 years ago?" I nudged Skylar, smirking. "When you thought it'd be a brilliant idea to inhale an entire bag of sour gummies and chocolate?" Skylar rolled his eyes, giving me a shove. "Oh, please. I wasn't the one who dared me, dickwad. That was all you." "Yeah, but you were the one who said, 'I can handle it, no problem.'" I laughed. 10 minutes later, you were hugging the toilet like it was your long-lost best friend. "At least I wasn't crying like a little asswipe," he shot back, crossing his arms. "You kept swearing off candy forever. For what? A day?" "Fuck you," I replied. "That was the longest 24 hours of my life." A laugh burst out of me and Skylar joined in. I stared into his clear blue eyes, and my heart clenched. How did I go years without seeing his face? He was close now, but I noticed he was just hovering, not at all eager to close the distance between us the way I felt. It struck me then that maybe he was waiting for my permission. "Will you kiss me again?" We both froze. I felt so stupid for blurting it out, but I needed to ask. My skin felt like live wire, and I was about to burst if he didn't touch me. Skylar didn't respond. He leaned in closer and gently pressed his lips to mine. My breath caught, and I forced myself to relax, my sweaty hands clenching and unclenching. It started slow again. Touching and tasting, I sighed into his mouth. Although his lips were slightly cold, I felt hot all over. He pulled back, our lips barely touching. We were just breathing in each other. Then Skylar pressed down with more force than before. My lips parted, and his tongue slid in, the wet feel of it going straight to my shaft. I squirmed, becoming increasingly aware of the heat pooling in my belly. It's soft and gentle, slowly driving me crazy because I knew Skylar was holding back. Skylar shifted a little, adjusting his weight and angling my head so he could deepen it. We both moaned when he pried my mouth open, his tongue snaking in deeper, licking the seams of my mouth. Skylar slotted himself between my thighs, so his entire body was pressed up against me, and an excited feeling lurched in my belly. Oh, this is nothing I've ever experienced before. Skylar's hands moved to my wrists, and he pinned them above my head, having absolute control over me. I threaded our fingers together, arching up to kiss him harder. Skylar growled, and a wave of bliss washed over me. I could feel his heart thumping hard in his chest, and the vibration of his throat when he moaned. It was exciting and intoxicating, while his facial hair scraped against my skin. Flames licked across my face, and Skylar's grip tightened on my wrist. Skylar's breath hitched into the space between us. Then he rolled his hips, the act sending a spark of pleasure to my shaft. I grunted, lifting my hips to match his thrusts as my shaft rubbed against the fabric of my jeans. Skylar took my bottom lips between his teeth and sucked delicately. I made a noise in my throat, and Skylar swallowed it. Damn it, things were getting hotter. I felt my t-shirt dampen despite the cool fall air. It wasn't wet enough, not messy enough, so I pushed harder, invading, exploring, mapping every inch of Skylar's mouth. He whined a little into the kiss, his hands trembling as he struggled to keep us both upright. Damn, he laughed, losing his balance for a second. I tried to steady him, but his arms swayed with the effort, and he ended up collapsing on top of me, limb to limb, chest to chest. The heat between us intensified, and I couldn't help but grin like an idiot as I wrapped my arms around his torso, squeezing him tight like I would a favorite toy. Skylar let out a breathless yelp, struggling against my smothering embrace, which only made me grin harder. Skylar attacked my neck, sucking and licking a wet trail across my Adam's apple. I groaned, arching into it. I kissed the top of his head, then let go, my hands cradling his cheeks as I lifted his face up to kiss him. Again and again. But he pried my hands away, sliding his own up under my shirt, his fingers exploring my stomach and chest, urging me to sit up. I complied, shifting until my back was against my duffel bag, propped up on the grass. Skylar's lean arms wrapped around my neck, and it was the simplest, most ordinary action. But I felt my pants tighten as he licked into my mouth, forcing me to spread my legs and hitch them over his thighs. "We should stop," I gasped, but my thighs gripped his waist. Our kisses grew louder and wetter, turning me on so much that I was practically ravishing him. Skylar held my chin with one hand and gave me a long, lingering kiss. "Then stop." I groaned and kissed him harder. It was a dance of tongues and teeth, so sweet it made me shiver with intensity. I had to pull him back by the hair just to catch my breath, and that was when Skylar did the one thing he knew drove me insane. He licked his lips, running his tongue from the corner of his mouth along his bottom lip, catching the piercing there, looking directly into my hooded eyes. A light buzzing caught my attention, and we both paused. Then Skylar reached into his pocket and took out his phone. Mo was calling. "Yeah?" Skylar responded, his voice raspy, his hand trailing beneath my shirt, gently pinching my nipple, causing me to shiver. "Okay, I'll see you out front." He ended the call. "I have to go." I nodded, then slowly detangled myself. I stood on shaky legs, feeling hot and breathless. My junk was unbearably hard in my jeans, but I cleared my throat. "Okay, I'll, see you later?" Skylar laughed, then kissed me one last time. "Yeah, bye." Bye. I watched him cross the field. His graphic t-shirt rumbled, but there was an undisputed swagger to his hips. I snorted, then walked in the opposite direction.
Chapter 19. Skylar James. I quickened my pace to the parking lot, my thoughts tangled up in the memory of Hunter. That kiss still lingered in my mind, the way his mouth had scraped against my lips, rough but tender, leaving a heat that I could still feel. Damn it. Who knew it would feel so good? It was like a jolt of electricity had passed between us, something undeniable and fierce. God, what the hell was I thinking? The first time he'd pressed his lips against mine, I should have shoved him away. I should have knocked him on his ass for all the years I've spent hating him, but I couldn't. As much as I hated to admit it, I'd spent just as long wanting him, yearning for him. I rounded the corner, and the parking lot came into view, but I was barely aware of it. My mind was still on Hunter, how his lips had pressed against mine, how the world had seemed to stop for a moment, leaving just the two of us. I could feel the ghost of his breath on my skin, that mix of urgency and hesitation that had left me wanting more. My heart thudded in my chest. A virgin? It was almost inconceivable, and the fact that he was offering himself up to me made my shaft harder than a rocket launcher. "What are you doing?" a voice asked. I flinched, almost jumping 10 feet in the air. Mo was leaning up against the wall, her gaze slanted to mine in a way that let me know that she'd seen most of it. "Nothing." I cleared my throat. "Where are the others?" "Waiting. For you," Mo said, then pushed off the wall. "Are you having fun?" A knot twisted in my stomach, and I understood what she meant. Immensely. Mo's gaze turned hard, and she walked back to the car, without another word. "Damn it," I hissed, and followed after her. Ace drove to her apartment, but the heavy silence in the car couldn't even be cut by their mindless chatter. After my first kiss with Hunter, I spent the night at Coach Sullivan's house, rethinking the plan. We were still going to take down Mason, but Hunter had a point. It wasn't fair for the other guys on the team to suffer, and besides, there were other ways for the lion to catch the lambs. Ace pulled up to her house, and we all filed out. The second we got downstairs, Edge, Ty, and Travis were already waiting for us with K-Dog on FaceTime. "What have you got?" I asked, taking my seat on Ace's plush leather couch. "Evelyn Grant was seen leaving the apartment duplex at 8:45 a.m. this morning," Edge said. "Fam, pulling that all night was crazy, yo." "What was she wearing?" I demanded. "Nothing, fam. Same as always. Dirty lingerie." Edge snorted. "Not that she wore it for long, if you know what I mean." He cackled. "Good work." I bumped his fist. "And Jack?" "He left around the same time," Ace replied, yawing. Man, I need coffee after that. Good. Everything with Mason had gone swimmingly. He'd been more than humiliated on the field, and the fact that the dumbass believed scouts were looking for him during their first game, without notifying their coach first, was pure gold. "Did you take the pictures?" "Got 'em right here," Ace said, pinning them on the wall. I squinted, then got up to inspect them. They were high-resolution photos of Jack kissing Evelyn and meeting her at a hotel in town. Wonderful. What else? Here. Mo took a few photos and pinned them to the walls. I looked at all the pictures and names connected by red strings with disgust churning in my stomach. Linda Jones, EJ, S-Mom, Sheriff Rick Snowfall, Jordy's dad, Special Prosecutor Tony Wallace, and Rebecca Coleman. They were all tied together like knots in a tangled rope, impossible to pull apart without unraveling everything. And damn did I want to burn it all to the ground. My hand twitched for my blade, but I stamped it down. When Rick Snowfall's face was pinned up on the wall, I saw Ty's jaw clench tight. He looked like he was about to explode. I knew why. That sheriff was a sick, mean old bastard, as cruel as the devil ever made. In juvie, Ty had told us about how a drug bust went wrong at his house. They didn't even have a warrant when they kicked down the door. Ty's older brother tried to fight back, but they shot him in the back. Then, they called him a violent offender and threw Ty in juvie, even though he was just a kid. I glanced over at Mo and saw her staring at the picture of Rebecca Coleman, her face tight with anger. Mo's family was newly immigrated from Kenya, and her mom had worked for the Jones family for a long time. But then one day, her mom just disappeared. Mo searched everywhere, but 2 months later, her mom's body washed up in the Colorado River. They said it was an accident, but Mo knew something was wrong. When she started asking questions, they made up a story about her breaking into the Coleman's house and sent her to Edgewater. The room was quiet, but you could feel how mad and hurt everyone was. We weren't just trying to figure out the truth. We were trying to make sure these people didn't get away with what they'd done. I turned back to the map, staring at all the lines connecting the names. We'd all lost something because of them, and now we were going to make sure they paid for it. He just needed to figure out a way to factor his deal with Hunter into everything. He knew everyone would be pissed, but it didn't matter. He made a deal, and he'd keep his word. "Change of plans," I announced. "We move our next plan off the field." Silence hijacked the room as they all stared at me. I stood my ground, staring at each and every one of them to convey that. "What do you mean, yo?" Edge demanded. "That's how we can hit them the hardest." Ace shook her head. "It's too late. Things are in motion and we can't stop them." "Well, we have to stop them. Just for now," I replied. "We don't include bystanders." "Bystanders?" Mo hissed. "Who the freaking hell is a bystander on that team?" "You know what I mean." I cut her off. "The other players don't deserve this. Some of their scholarships depend on it. Coach Sullivan doesn't deserve it." "So, now that you're living with him, you've had a change of heart," Mo said. Her nostrils flared. "Ty, Edge, K-Dog, you guys know what I mean," I replied, ignoring her. "You guys can play. I understand we have a goal, and we'll work towards that. But taking down the team can't be our objective. We could turn this into a career." Ty, Edge, and K-Dog went silent, mulling it over. I knew Ace, Mo, and Travis wouldn't understand, but eventually they'd come on board. I waited patiently for them to think about it, and then K-Dog spoke. "Okay, I'm down." "Me too," Ty said. "Some of those guys ain't so bad. Besides, making it to nationals would give me a chance to get out, you know." "I guess it's okay." Edge shrugged. His brown eyes bore into mine. "As long as this doesn't become a regular thing, yo." "It won't," I promised. "We can't target bystanders, like I said. It's not right. We go in and out, clean. We take them down, destroy them at the root. That is our main objective." Mo scoffed, shaking her head. Ace looked equally upset, but kept silent with Mo. "So," Ty said, "how do we change our plans?" "That's why we're here to figure it out," I replied. We spent the next few hours working out a brand new plan. It was arduous, but I was relieved when we finally finished. By the time I dismissed everyone, it was close to 6. I shrugged on my jacket grabbed my duffel bag, and got ready to catch the bus back to Coach Sullivan's house. Just as I reached the door, Mo stopped me, her beautiful face twisted in a sneer. "A word?" "No," I replied, wrenching open the door, but her hand shot out, and she slammed it shut. "I don't want to talk to you if you're just going to chew me out again." "And why the hell would I do that?" Mo asked, tilting her head. "Is it because you're screwing Hunter, or—" I grabbed her arm and hauled her into another room. I closed the door and glared at her. "Keep your voice down." "Why? You don't want Travis to know you're two-timing him?" Mo's eyes blazed. "Travis and I aren't dating." I spat at her. "You know it's different for him. He's in love with you, and all you've done is string him along." Mo gritted out. "Who the hell are you right now?" "The Skylar I know would never treat his friends like that." "The Skylar you know is dead," I replied, but my voice was blank. "He died a long time ago." "So you finally remember what they did to you?" "What he did to you?" Mo demanded. "I never forgot," I replied, coldly. Mo stared at me, then finally calmed down. "Then why do you not want to screw with the team? What made you stop?" "Ty, Edge, and K-Dog have a chance," I said. "They can make it out. That's what Coach Sullivan saw in them, and I won't rob them of that because we're out for revenge. There's always an afterward, Mo." "What happens afterward?" "What happens when we're standing on a mountain of corpses, or bathing in the blood of our enemies?" "And that's what you want with him? Afterward?" My breath stuttered to a stop. Was it what I wanted with Hunter? She stared at me, and I forgot how well she could read me. I clenched my teeth. It doesn't matter what I want. What matters is what is. They have a chance. You've seen them play, and so do I. I'm not going to waste my life chasing revenge. When I get it, it'll be great, but there's always an afterward, and I won't rob them of that. Mo chewed on her bottom lip. I'm scared you'll lose your way, that he'll twist your mind like he's done before. He's already changing you, and you haven't even noticed." "Nothing has changed," I replied, my voice stern. "I swear to you, when the time comes, I'll freaking gut him myself." "Skylar," Mo sighed. "Just be careful. I don't trust him, and you've let your guard down for him before." She reached up and traced the scar tissue over my clavicle. My mouth twitched into a smile, but my heart felt cold. "Don't worry, that will never happen." She frowned and withdrew her hand. "Have you seen Razor yet?" "Travis said he was looking for you. Tell me you aren't still working for him." "I'm not working for him," I lied. "At least, not this very second." "Skylar, you know what he is and what he makes you do. He's horrible for you." "Wow, your insight is truly mind-blowing. Please, tell me more." Mo huffed, turning her face away, jaw clenched. "Fine, I'll see you later." She moved to walk away, but I grabbed her wrist, my heart hammering. I hated it when she was mad at me. I wrapped my arms around her and hugged her close. "Sorry." Mo was quiet before she finally wrapped her arms around me. "I'm not a stranger. I'm your soulmate. You can tell me anything." I snorted a laugh, but hugged her tighter and then let go. "I know. Listen, I have to go. Coach has me on a tight curfew, but we'll talk soon. Mo nodded, and I squeezed her hand before stepping out the front door. As I walked to the bus stop, her words echoed in my mind. I knew I couldn't let myself get too close to Hunter, but the deal we made was too good to pass up. He was willing to give me all the information I needed on Mason and his crew. It would be foolish not to use him and then discard him later. After all, he was one of them. I had to keep reminding myself of that. But despite everything, when our lips touched, something fluttered in my chest. I shoved those thoughts down, forcing myself to focus. When the bus finally pulled up, I got off near Coach Sullivan's house. As I started to walk up the driveway, I noticed a black Cadillac parked down the street. Damn it, my teeth clenched, and I shoved my fists into my pockets as I walked over to the car, already bracing myself for whatever was coming next. The window rolled down, and Razor stuck his head out, a sly smile curling his oily face. His thick, wavy black hair struggled to stay slicked back, with some strands escaping the gel. He had a neatly trimmed beard and a waxy smile that didn't reach his black, soulless eyes. A gold ring gleamed on his pinky finger, and a shiny gold Rolex watch wrapped around his wrist. When he spoke, his thick Texas drawl oozed out like syrup, making everything he said sound slow and sticky. Skylar, long time no see. Sup? Why don't you come take a ride with me? He smiled, patting the seat right next to him. I got into the Cadillac. Razor parked it down the street and immediately got into the back seat. I followed, unzipped my pants, and let him get to work. Razor grunted on top of me, and my mind disconnected from my body. I let it float above and beyond, and when it was done, he pulled out, panting, trying to push his oily hair back. He passed me a smoke and I took it, not caring for my nudity. He gave me some cash and stared down at me. So, when are you coming back to work? I shrugged. Between football, school, and the games coming up, I didn't have much time and he knew that, so there was no point in repeating it. Razor's mouth twitched. I don't like that response, Skylar. I'll come back when I can, I replied. Things are too hectic right now, you know that. If I start missing class, they'll become suspicious. Then you won't mind if Travis picks up the slack, Razor declared. Ice filled my veins and I turned to stare at him. I told you to leave Travis alone. Razor's smile grew. Oh, and why would I do that? Don't think I didn't notice that little twink taking from your share. What? You think you are shrinking your duties because you've made a deal with him? I gritted my teeth. Whatever. Tell me the next client and I'll be there tomorrow. That's more like it, he said, patting my cheek. Razor leaned in for a kiss, but I backed away, his eyes cold. Fine, have it your way. Get out and don't leave jizz on my leather seats. I grunted my response and hiked up my jeans and underwear, sliding out of the car. Walking up the driveway, I saw the light was still on in the kitchen, and I realized with a start that I had missed dinner. Damn. I raced up to the porch and used my key to open the door. Coach Sullivan was just putting my plate in the fridge. Hey, sorry I'm late. I missed my stop at the bus, I said, slightly breathless. Coach Sullivan gave me a cool once-over. No problem, kid, he muttered, then shoved the plate onto the table. It's still warm. Eat up. I sighed and then dug in. The plate had a big slice of tasty meatloaf, juicy and cooked just right. Next to it was some fluffy white rice, covered in a bit of sweet barbecue sauce. There were also some green peas on the side, adding a nice crunch. The whole thing smelled really good. "Thank you," I said, around a mouthful of meatloaf. "It's good." "Yeah?" Coach Sullivan grabbed a beer from the fridge and joined me. "So, do you want to tell me why I saw you get off the bus 20 minutes ago and then head over to the Cadillac parked down the street, kid?" I choked on my food, turning to stare at him in shock. Coach tilted his head and pointed to the window that was open with a full view of his driveway. I swallowed hard, then went back to eating. "Nope." "Let me rephrase the question then," Coach Sullivan replied. "Is there something I should be notifying your parole officer about?" Crap. I gritted my teeth, my hand gripping the fork until my knuckles were white. "It was just a friend. A friend who drives a Cadillac Escalade worth over $100,000. Coach Sullivan deadpanned. "What of it?" I snapped. "I'm not doing anything illegal, so you can tell whoever you freaking want." I slammed my fork on the table and stood up so fast it knocked over my chair. "You know what? I don't even know why I bothered. You're just like the rest." Hurt flashed in Coach Sullivan's eyes, and he stood. "Look, kid, I'm sorry." "Sorry? You're not freaking sorry. Look at you, surly old Sullivan whose wife left him and whose son freaking hates him. You have no right to judge me." I snarled at him, then turned on my heel and stormed toward my room. I shut the door with so much force the entire frame shook violently. Damn it. I was sick of these people judging me and thinking the worst of me. I was working. How else was I going to make any freaking money? Razor was the only one who offered me good pay. I had to work for him. Nothing in this life was for free. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm myself down. I didn't have anywhere else to go. It was either here or the shelter, and there was no way I was going back there. Anger flared in my chest as I fought to stay composed. This was all Hunter's fault. If I hadn't been so goddamn blind and in love with him, I would have left my foster family a long time ago. A part of me wanted to smash him to pieces for all of it. Instead, I grabbed my clothes and headed right to the shower. Soon, I'd get my chance to finally carve him open. Chapter 20. Skylar James. I woke in a foul mood and things didn't get better from there. Thick clouds blotted out the sun as I stormed to my next class practically fuming. I threw my backpack onto the ground, startling several students, and threw myself into the seat furthest to the back. Time ticked away as the lecture began, and I avoided Kelly's probing gaze for my usual seat in the front. She had served her purpose anyway. I took notes almost mindlessly, ignoring the flare of rage every time. I thought about Coach's words from yesterday, because, I really needed more crap to deal with. It's one thing to already know you're a nobody, but having it spelled out so bluntly, well, that's a special kind of sting. He didn't recruit me because he saw potential or anything like that. Nope, it was all about making himself feel like a hero. Let's take all the rejects and polish them up for society. How noble. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Not in the mood to put up with Mo freaking out over nothing. It was fine. Everything was freaking fine. I didn't need her to tell me what's right or what's wrong. Hunter was my goddamn plaything, and he'd figure it out soon enough. The class ended, and just as I was picking up my stuff, my TA called me to the front. Mr. James," my law TA said. Using his index finger, he shoved his thick, black-rimmed glasses higher on his nose. "A word?" He went to his desk and pulled out my assignment. "This," he waved it in front of me, "was severely lacking. Can you tell me what went wrong?" He handed it over to me and frowned. I took the paper from him, trying not to roll my eyes. Mr. Maloney's curly brown hair fell into his mocha-colored eyes as he regarded me, his expression stern, but not unkind. "Your analysis of the case law was far too superficial," he began, tapping the paper with his finger. "You cited precedent, but you didn't apply it properly. In an introductory law paper, it's crucial not just to reference cases, but to demonstrate how they influence the current legal issue at hand. You need to show me that you understand the principle of stare decisis and how it should guide your argument. Also, your discussion on the application of statutory interpretation was vague. I want to see a more detailed breakdown of how the wording of the statute impacts the case outcome." I nodded, even though I was only half listening. Redoing the paper was the last thing I wanted to do, but I could tell there was no getting out of it. "All right, I'll give you one last chance to fix it," Mr. Maloney said, his tone softening slightly. "But I expect you to address the issues thoroughly. If you're struggling with the concepts, come to my office hours and we'll go over them." Wonderful. As if this day couldn't get any better. Now I had to redo a paper too. I shoved the assignment into my bag and forced a smile. "Thanks, Mr. Maloney. I'll get it right this time." He nodded, pushing his glasses up again. "I'm sure you will, Mr. James. Just make sure you dig deeper into the material. Understanding the reasoning behind the law is what separates a good argument from a weak one." "Yeah, got it," I muttered, already dreading the long night ahead. A dark mood hung over me, making everything around me feel tense. My jaw was tight, teeth grinding as I moved through the halls toward the locker room. K-Dog was back and ready to play, but the guys were tense. Ever since the fight, Mason had drawn a hard line in the sand, and now it was us against them. Hunter seemed almost oblivious to it as usual, and kept his eye on the game. But Coach Sullivan was high on alert. We were punished for brawling on the field with suicides, and by the time they were done, I felt like my legs were going to fall off. "You call that running?" Coach hollered from the sidelines. "I've seen toddlers in a playground move faster." I swapped out for Hunter, and the second the ball was about to be hiked, I saw Mason's eyes dart to another player, and I noticed they were switching up the play. I braced myself, but it was too late. Mason left a gap wide open in the line. Before I could react, I was blindsided. A freight train of muscle plowed into my side, and pain flared in my hip like someone had jammed a knife into it. The impact sent me sprawling, and I hit the ground hard, my breath knocked out of me. The same crap Mason had pulled when K-Dog ended up with that sprained ankle a few weeks ago. God damn it. Fury surged through me, hotter than the pain in my hip. I ripped off my helmet and stormed up to Mason, my vision going red. But before I could get in his face, Coach's whistle pierced the air. Mason just laughed, the sound grating on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Nice try," he sneered, knocking my shoulder as he brushed past me. I stood there, fists clenched, every muscle in my body screaming at me to go after him. But I held back, my chest heaving. Mason had screwed me over, and he knew it. The practice ended on a sour note, with Coach screaming at us to get it together. I went into my usual stall to change out of my clothes, ignoring Mason and the other guys, then grabbed my gear and walked outside. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. Just as I was rounding the corner, I saw Hunter standing there waiting for me. Great. What did he want now? Sighing through my nose, I waited for him to approach me. Hunter shot me a shy smile, chewing on his bottom lip. I tried not to track the way it disappeared between his pearly white teeth and came back red and moistened. Why was God trying to kill me? People were filling out of the locker room, but Hunter didn't move and neither did I. We just stood there, watching each other, until finally, we were the last ones left. Hunter looked left and right, then stepped closer. He leaned in and hesitantly pressed a trembling kiss to my lips. All the fight bled from my body. I stood there, frozen with his mouth pressed up against mine. It was brief, and I felt how nervous he was from the shaky, uncoordinated kiss, but heat had flared across my skin. "Hi," he whispered, flushing too. A rough, dry ball lodged itself in my throat, scraping as I swallowed hard, trying to clear the path for the words I couldn't seem to find. What was that? Why was this kiss so sweet, so freaking innocent? I've kissed hundreds of men, countless by name, and yet this was the only kiss that swept my legs right from under me. "Hello." I forced the words out. Hunter rubbed the back of his neck, fringes of his hair escaping his ponytail. "Do you want to come over?" It was a bad idea. I had a paper to write. Mo was blowing up my phone, and I was sure Razor had clients for me to see. But yet, watching Hunter stand there squirming lit a fire in my belly. Sure. I walked past him, and we got on the bus together. The ride was silent as I stared out the window. Hunter's nerves were starting to get to me, but it had the opposite effect. This was new to him, and as much as I didn't want to believe it, Hunter really hadn't been with anyone. I licked my dry lips, trying to ignore the giddiness spreading through my veins like fizzing soda. We reached his house in 30 minutes, and the second we got inside, Hunter put some food in the oven while I sat at the kitchen table with my homework. Hunter sat across from me and took out his binder. "What are you working on?" "Law," I replied. "You're taking law? I thought Kelly said you were in her psych class." "Psychology of law," I clarified. "Oh, cool." He went back to his textbook. "I'm taking sports medicine." "I didn't ask." Hunter's face flushed, and irritation sparked in my chest. "So, I'm telling you, that's what friends do. They tell people stuff." "Sure, Davis," I replied, then went back to my studies. We worked for a few hours, and I managed to rewrite my paper. Tomorrow I'd head to the library and type it up and resubmit it before class. Hunter sat in front of the TV, and I joined him in silence. We watched some weird sitcom, not that I was paying much attention to it. My thoughts were elsewhere, but the noise was a welcomed distraction. "Oh." Hunter shifted in his seat, spreading his thighs out a little more so that our knees were slightly touching. "I forgot to ask, where are you staying now?" "Why?" I asked, not keeping my eyes off the TV. "In case I want to visit you," Hunter said. I pursed my lips. "I'm staying with Coach Sullivan." Hunter's eyes bulged. No freaking way? You're serious? I gave him a deadpan look. Why, how? Campus is too expensive, and it's not like anyone wants to live with a criminal straight out of reform school, I muttered. He offered, and I took it. Does anyone else know? My crew, I replied. Don't tell anyone else. Hunter nodded. Of course not. We have a spare room. Why don't you? Right. But are we actually watching this, or is it just here to distract us from the crushing weight of our own poor life choices? I cut him off. Hunter slammed his mouth shut, and we fell into a silence, punctuated only by the weird sitcom on the TV. As the hours ticked by, I texted Coach to let him know I'd be staying out tonight. Hunter eventually whipped up a brisket, and the tantalizing smell wafted through the room. The rich, smoky aroma, mingled with hints of caramelized onions and garlic, made my stomach rumble. Well, here's hoping this brisket tastes as good as it smells. Hunter's cooking skills are a bit of a gamble. In grade school, his famous cookies were a true test of my dental resilience. We ate in silence, too, with nothing but the sounds of our forks scraping against our plates. Hunter washed the dishes, and I dried them in a familiar fashion that hit a little too close to home for me. I sat back down on the couch. Hunter sat beside me, but instead of turning on the TV again, he turned to face me. Did I do something? My stomach clenched at the question. I curled my hand into a fist on my jeans. It was an impossible question to answer. A large part of me hated Skylar for not seeing what Mason and his goons had done to me today, and another part of me felt numb to it. Hunter was never going to change, but I needed him if I wanted to take down Mason. Yes. Why? Hunter's mouth parted in shock, but he was quick to recover. Whoa, what? Last time we kissed, and... You think a few kisses will make up for... If I've done something, please, Hunter begged. Tell me. I don't know. I'm still new at this. I can learn. I can be better for you. What the hell was he talking about? I regarded him for a beat, and then turned away, my mouth twitching. I'm joking. Relax. Liar, Hunter muttered. You're upset. Did something happen? What can I do? What can you do? I wanted to sneer the words back at him. Nothing. I just didn't do well on my assignment. It had nothing to do with you. Oh. Hunter swallowed, and I watched his Adam's apple bob. Okay. He fidgeted, and then turned the TV back on. An hour later, he shut it off, and we both agreed to head to bed. Hunter's dad was working nights, and I noticed he only invited me over whenever he knew his father wasn't going to be home. Not that I was complaining. I got dressed for bed in the bathroom, and when I got out, I noticed Hunter standing shirtless by his bedroom door. God help me. My throat went dry as I took in his rippling abs, chiseled pectorals, and V-cut that disappeared into a pair of loose sweats. His sandy brown hair was unbound, falling in ringlets around his face. Hey. He was flushing. The couch is a bit lumpy. Why don't you... Like old times? This was nothing like the old times, and the raging hard-on I had was proof enough of that. Damn it, it was a bad idea. I heard my phone buzz again, and I sighed hard. Do you know what you're doing? Hunter nodded, looking down. I want you. Okay. I moved like a robot, but my heart was pounding like a drum. As soon as I stepped into his room, Hunter shut the door behind us. I looked around his room, feeling a wave of nostalgia. There were some new posters of famous football players on the wall and a lava lamp that Hunter still refused to toss. Seriously, who even still uses those? And a bunch of really old photos of us together. I picked up one photo of me wearing my glasses, with Hunter's arm around my shoulders. We were making the silliest faces, and I couldn't help but grin. My chest felt warm as I turned to look at him. Hunter was still red, but his eyes had this determined look, like he was ready to tackle a football. Or me. "I want to kiss you," he blurted out. Why? I didn't mean to say the words out loud, but something about his eager expression caught me off guard. I was used to being wanted and desired by so many other men, but being with Hunter had been one of my biggest fantasies ever since I was a kid. A part of me didn't want to believe it was coming true. "Because—" His breath shuddered, then sighed. "You aren't making this easy for me, Skylar." "You were straight 2 minutes ago," I pointed out. "Forgive me for being suspicious. Kissing Lavinia never felt like this, so," Hunter replied. "If you're uncomfortable, we don't have to." Did I say I was uncomfortable? I barked at him. "I'm fine. You're hot. I just wanted to know what this meant, that's all." Hunter's brow wrinkled. "I don't understand. What do you want it to mean?" "Everything." The thought stunned me, and I knew Mo had been right. When it came to Hunter, I couldn't control myself. Whatever. I'd take whatever he was willing to offer. It doesn't matter. I'm tired. I crawled onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling. I was dressed in a thin white tank and gray sweats. Hunter turned off the lights and settled into bed right beside me. I felt very aware of each and every breath he took. Hunter turned to face me, then hesitantly reached out, placing his hand over mine. "We don't have to do anything." I felt the tension inside me begin to unravel. Hunter's hazel eyes glowed softly in the light, and I knew he didn't want anything from me. Just having me there was enough for him. It was that raw vulnerability that almost carved me open. I hated it. I hated that he was the only one who looked at me, not for what I could give him, but for what he could give me. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing I could either fall or find solid ground. Razor, Mo, Coach Sullivan, and they all had expectations of me except him. I cupped the back of his neck and dragged him into a bruising kiss. As I pressed my lips to Hunter's plump ones, it was like the last heartbeat of a dying world, where all that mattered was the connection between us, holding the end of everything at bay. Hunter made a noise in the back of his throat, and I growled, slipping my tongue deep inside his moist heat. I hauled him up so that he was on top of me, our bodies aligning in the darkness. I attacked his mouth, clutching his wide shoulder blades, running my hands down his smooth back that flexed and bunched beneath my hands. Hunter was still new, so his movements were a bit clumsy, but whatever he lacked in finesse, he made up in eagerness. He chased my mouth, prying it open with newfound confidence. I fisted his hair, angling his head to deepen it, licking the seams of his mouth. Hunter fumbled to undo his sweats, and together we fell into the night.
Chapter 21. Hunter James. I cried out into Skylar's mouth, shivering through my release. Skylar grunted as he hiked me up higher on top of him, his mouth descending on mine with near-rabid kisses that left me breathless. I grunted while he nibbled on my lower lip, tasting and sucking gently, eliciting another moan from my lips. His hands roamed up and down my body and I gasped, feeling oversensitive and raw. Jesus, will it always be like this? I groaned. Skylar's hands found my hips, tracing a firm pattern down my sides and circling around my sharp hip bones. His mouth moved hungrily over mine again, and I gently cupped the back of his neck to bring him closer. I yanked off and kissed and sucked his neck, feeling a pang in my chest at the ridged skin there. I paused, tracing a pink, jagged scar near his collarbone. Skylar froze, and I swallowed hard. Can I? I looked at him and noticed the tempest swirling in his gaze. Skylar gave a curt nod, and I dipped down to kiss the scar, tracing it with my tongue. I moved to the others there, a slight cluster of tissues, pink and raised but covered in ink as if to blot them out. But I remembered. I remembered the way Skylar had wailed, the sound scraping my skin raw and piercing my ears like white-hot needles. He'd been in agony then and now. I couldn't even imagine how I'd feel to watch my murderer escape after butchering me. Hot tears were brimming in my eyes, but Skylar brought my head up and kissed me again. The apology burned the tip of my tongue, but I knew Skylar didn't want my useless words. His hands moved from my hips, traveling a burning path up my torso, stimulating me all over again. I'm breathless with desire, and I bury my face in his neck, trying to catch my breath. It was the first time I ever felt so bare, so seen. Skylar threaded his fingers through my hair, gently pulling my head back. Good. I nodded, feeling my face redden. Good. How about we try and get some sleep, Skylar replied, but he didn't let go. His hands held on fractionally tighter. Okay. I nuzzled against him, listening to his heart thumping in his chest. We stayed that way all night until sleep claimed us. When I woke up, Skylar was gone. I didn't let it bother me too much. He had his classes, and I'm sure he wanted to go home and change after what we did. Still, a part of me was hoping he'd stay the morning with me. When I arrived, the school was buzzing like a beehive. Everyone seemed extra excited, whispering and rushing to class as if they couldn't wait to be there. I was halfway to my sports medicine class when I spotted Mason in front of the lecture hall, and something about the way he was pacing back and forth set off alarms in my head. Before I could even think about what was happening, Mason's hand shot out, grabbing my collar. My heart jumped into my throat as he hauled me around the corner of the building, slamming me hard against the wall. What the hell? I gasped, my mind racing to catch up with my body. I was pinned, trapped by Mason's fierce grip, and the look in his eyes told me something had happened. Did you know about it? Mason snarled. I shoved his arm off of me. Know what? What the hell is wrong with you? Don't play stupid, Hunter, he seethed. I've seen you hanging out with that reject, and you sure as hell haven't been hanging out with us lately. Did you know about it? About what? I burst out, annoyed at him for cornering me minutes away from class starting. I have to get to class, get to the friggin' point. Lavinia's mother is dead. My breath caught. What? I stared at him incredulously, and his jaw worked. Dead? What do you mean? You know what she was, an elite, and she was popping pills like they were Tic Tacs. It all finally came to a head. No way. I'd only met Lavinia's mother on several occasions, and she always seemed larger than life. It didn't make sense as to why she would suddenly kill herself. She was once a debutante champion at Redwood Creek, and later became an international beauty pageant winner, earning titles like Miss Texas USA, Miss Lone Star State, and Miss Bluebonnet Queen. I had no idea she would take her own life. My pulse pounded in my ears as my thoughts raced back to her. "How's Lavinia?" Mason eyed me. "Come to my house tonight. Don't be late." He shouldered past me. What the hell was going on? All throughout class, my stomach was twisting up in knots. I remembered Skylar's phone buzzing late last night, so there was no way he had anything to do with her death. Would they try to blame him for it? What if Mo had something to do with it? No, it could have just been a normal suicide and nothing more. Lavinia's mother had been obsessive, wanting her daughter to be the perfect dancer, the perfect cheerleader. I knew it had stressed Lavinia out so much she became depressed, even suffered from eating disorders. The way she bullied Lavinia always made me think there was something wrong with that woman, and maybe I had been right. Finishing up the day, I went to the parking lot and spotted Mason there waiting for me. EJ and Jordy were there too. But what struck me was that so was Lavinia. She wore baggy sweats, her hair thrown up in a hazardous messy bun, but her eyes were sunken black pits. We took 2 cars to Mason's house, and when we arrived, we headed straight down to Mason's den. My hands felt clammy, like holding on to melting ice. Mason stood in the center of the room, then wrapped his arms around Lavinia in a tight hug. She sobbed, hugging him back. Then EJ and Jordy joined in, as if in their collective arms they could keep her from fracturing into pieces. I didn't move, too busy staring off into space, thinking hard about what was happening. Mason and the others pulled away. "Tell us what happened," Mason spoke. Lavinia took a shaky breath and turned to me. "It was just like I told the police. I came home around 9 p.m. last night, and there she was." Lavinia cupped her mouth. God, she looked peaceful. I saw a figure dart out the back and I followed them. They had blonde hair and tattoos. A tightness gripped my chest, like a rope slowly being pulled taut, and I stared back at her. Mason nodded and gave her an encouraging nod. It was too dark to see for sure, but I know it was him. Him. I stood slowly, my gut churning. "What is this?" EJ snorted. "What do you think it is? Man, you're freaking blind. Obviously, it was Skylar." Skylar. Impossible. He was with me all of last night. I squinted at Lavinia, feeling sick. She lied to the police about Skylar again, but her mother had just died, which meant I was on my feet in minutes, sprinting out the front door like my life freaking depended on it. Mason hauled after me, screaming my name, but I didn't hear anything he had to say. My feet pounded against the pavement as I sprinted toward the bus stop, my heart racing as fast as my thoughts. Sweat dripped down my face, stinging my eyes, but I didn't care. Lavinia had lied again, and this time it was about Skylar. I couldn't believe she would do this, especially now, after her mother had just died. But she did. She told the police that Skylar was there after her mother passed. It was freaking bull. All of it. My fists clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I could feel the rage bubbling inside me, threatening to explode. The sheriff wouldn't care about the truth. He'd probably arrest Skylar just for fun. The thought made me want to scream. By the time I reached the police precinct, I was breathless, but I didn't stop. I noticed a large crowd gathered outside, but I didn't give them a second thought. I pushed through, shoving people aside as I made my way inside. The tension in the air was thick, and I immediately spotted Coach Sullivan and my father standing near the entrance. Why didn't anyone call me? The question burned in my mind as I stormed over to them. Before I could even get a word out, an officer blocked my path. "Son, you can't come back there." "That's my best friend," I shouted, my voice shaking with anger. "I have information regarding this case. You better let me through, or so help me. I'll burn this place to the ground." "Are you threatening an officer?" "No, I'm threatening you," I snarled. "Get out of my way." "Hunter," my dad called. Where have you been? We've been trying to call you. I marched past him and stopped dead when I saw Skylar handcuffed to a chair. There was a deep cut down the side of his left brow, and his nose was busted, the blood drenching his graphic white t-shirt. My heart wanted to flee my chest, and I rounded on Sheriff Rick, who had an ice pack over his bloodied knuckles, but a sly grin on his face. His face was lined and rough, with deep wrinkles near his eyes. His gray hair was slicked back with too much gel, making it shine in a way that didn't look right. His cold blue eyes had a hard, mean look, like he enjoyed being in charge. He was tall and broad, his tan uniform stretched tight over muscles that hadn't softened with age. The badge on his chest gleamed, but it was clear he didn't play by the rules. His thick mustache curled up at the ends, making his sly grin even more unsettling as he held the ice pack over his bloody knuckles. I wanted to smash his face in. "Let him go," I said, breathless with rage. Rick Snowfell frowned at me, and then recognition flickered in his eyes. "Hunter, ain't you Jordy's friend? You get these goddamn cuffs off him right now, or so help me I'll break your other hand." "Calm down there, son," the same officer from before spoke in a placating voice. "This here is a murder investigation." "There is no murder," I gritted out. "Skylar was with me the entire freaking night. Check the CCTV cameras near my building." Rick Snowfell stepped up to me. "Are you sure about that, son? We've got an eyewitness." "Who freaking lied?" I burst out. "She said she saw a man with blonde hair and tattoos. I don't know why you would immediately think of Skylar. It turns out your investigation work is more about getting fat and eating donuts than actually doing your freaking job." "Hunter," my dad admonished, but I didn't care. It was happening again, and this time I wouldn't let it. Skylar would never go through this again, or so help me I'd kill them all. We tried to pull him in for questioning, and he ran. Rick Snowfell shrugged. "It ain't my fault he got spooked, now is it, boy? Fine. We'll look into it. We wouldn't want to be labeled as prejudiced or anything." He snorted. A woman cut through the crowd, dressed in a simple, crisp navy suit, and flashed her badge when she got close enough. "I'm Officer Laura Mitchell, parole officer," she announced clearly. Her voice had a firm, no-nonsense edge that commanded attention. "I need to speak with Skylar James immediately." "Good. Come into my office," Rick said. He shot him one last dirty look and disappeared with her into his office. They hauled Skylar up and he winced, taking him to a cell downstairs. We locked eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear there. "He needs medical attention," I rasped, my throat constricting. I couldn't watch them take him away again. "He's bleeding. You can't just freaking let him bleed." "Step aside, boy. Unless you want to be put in the cell next to him, I suggest you move out of the way," an officer spat. I felt the walls of the station close in around me, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. My eyes darted to Skylar, now being dragged down the dimly lit corridor. The sight of him, barely conscious and bleeding, made my heart pound harder against my ribs. The panic was overwhelming, like a tidal wave crashing over me. "Mr. Mickelson is on his way, okay? Just try to calm down." My father's hand gripped my shoulder. "We need a lawyer. We need—" I choked on the words, the fear tightening around my throat. My vision blurred with tears. "I know, kid. I know. Just breathe. We're doing everything we can." But the words felt empty, a flimsy shield against the raw terror gripping me. I could see the shadows lengthening in the corridor, Skylar's form barely visible as he was shoved roughly into the cell. The officer's eyes flicked toward me with barely concealed irritation. "You think we're letting him bleed out? We've called an ambulance. Just stay out of the way." An ambulance. The thought was a small relief, but it did little to stem the surge of helplessness. My legs felt like lead as I tried to take in slow, steadying breaths, but the panic kept rising, a relentless storm. "Please," I pleaded, turning to the officer with desperation in my eyes. "He needs help now. He can't wait." "The medic's on the way. They'll be here soon. Just sit tight." My father squeezed my shoulder, steering me toward the bench. "Let's sit down. We'll wait for Mr. Mickelson together. We need to stay strong." I nodded numbly, allowing him to guide me to a nearby bench. I sat down heavily, my mind racing with images of Skylar in that cell, the blood, the fear. It didn't take long for Mr. Mickelson to arrive. He went into the back to speak to Officer Rick Snowfell and Skylar's parole officer, but when he came out, his face was drawn in exhaustion. I stood when he approached, wringing my hands. "Okay. Do you want the good news or the bad news?" My heart jammed into my throat. "Just tell us," Coach Sullivan demanded. "Good news? They can't charge him. It's just a song and a prayer that Lavinia had seen him at that time, and that it was clear she fabricated it. But the bad news is that the investigation is still ongoing, and it might only be a matter of time before something else comes up. Plus, even if he's cleared of this, the damage to his reputation might be harder to repair." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank God. How's Skylar? Can we see him?" "They're releasing him now." He inclined his head to where the officers were bringing Skylar up from the cell. He was still wearing the same bloodied t-shirt, but his nose was bandaged, and so was the cut on his eye. I almost sprinted toward him and wrapped my arms around his waist so tight I thought I'd die. Skylar stood there for a moment, but I could feel the slight tremor in his spine, and I smoothed my hands down his back. Finally, his hand came up to my back, and he hugged me. We parted, and I stared deep into his eyes. They were haunted. "Let's go home and I'll—" "Hunter," my dad called, "why don't you let Coach Sullivan take him back to his place? We can all talk there." I bit my lip, nodding, then returned my gaze back to Skylar. "Do you need anything? Did they take anything?" "My knapsack," he spoke, but his voice sounded vacant. I quickly grabbed his backpack in mine. Slowly, we walked out of the precinct. The second we got into the parking lot, Mo rushed over and hugged Skylar so tightly she almost knocked him over. She was crying and shaking so badly. Skylar didn't say anything. He didn't even hug her back. Instead, he pried her arms off him and stared deeply into her eyes. "What have you done?" "Only a flame as fierce can quell a raging fire." Skylar froze, his mouth twitching, and then his eyes were harder than iron. Mo's face looked ashen and her chin wobbled. "Please, Skylar." He stormed away from her and my stomach clenched. I'd never seen Skylar so furious, and it struck me then that maybe Mo had something to do with Lavinia's mom's death. But how? How were they interconnected? Fear coiled in the pit of my stomach, but we all piled into Coach Sullivan's hatchback and drove away. Lavinia had lied to the police again, but Rick Snowfell had left them off. Was it because he knew it was a lie? Or because he had something much more sinister planned for Skylar? Chapter 22. Hunter Davis. I wrapped my arms around Skylar's neck the second he closed the bathroom door and clung to him. I couldn't tell which one of us was shaking more, but I knew I couldn't let him go. We stood, Skylar leaning against Coach Sullivan's bathroom granite countertop, his arms locked around my waist and his face buried in the crook of my neck. "Are you okay?" I breathed, peppering his face with kisses. "How badly did they hurt you?" Skylar snorted a laugh. "No more than I'm used to." "Goddamn bastards," I hissed. Rick Snowfell didn't even try to be reasonable. "Where did they find you?" "On my way to class," Skylar replied, but his eyes seemed vacant. "I don't take kindly to cops, so I freaking ran. That's when Rick got me with a right hook." I turned his chin and eyed the bruise spreading like mulberry ink beneath his eyes, from his eyes down to his busted nose. It must have been a hard hit because he was bleeding pretty badly. I'll kill him. Get in line, Skylar scoffed. He let go of me and braced his hands onto the countertop. I'm fine, though. I nodded, releasing a hard breath. Okay. Do you want to explain why they think you're involved in her murder? Skylar's jaw tightened and his eyes went cold. Do you think I was involved her in murder? Of course not, I said immediately. Why did Lavinia assume it was you? Skylar stood to his full height, forcing me to step back. Let's go outside. I won't want to have to tell the same story 1,000,000 times. He moved past me and walked out of the bathroom. I followed, and when we got into the living room, I saw my dad and Coach Sullivan sitting on the couch waiting for us, along with one of the officers. Skylar's parole officer was talking on the phone several feet away, outside with the screen door left wide open. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first hint of evening coolness slipped through the mesh. Everything okay? My dad asked, staring at Skylar. Skylar gave him a nonchalant look, and I answered for him. We're fine, thanks. I turned to the officer. Can you tell us exactly what happened? The officer frowned, and I tried to control the rage flaring in my chest. I reckoned. We found Rebecca Coleman's body at 9 p.m. last night. She died due to self-inflicted asphyxiation, otherwise known as a suicide bag. At first we determined it was foul play, considering the fact that Rebecca Coleman was a well-respected member of our humble community. The officer sniffed. Anyway, her daughter had found her and said she saw someone matching Skylar's description creeping out of the back. You claim he was with you all night, the officer sneered. So, we'll wait to see what the CCTV cameras say. I'm not claiming anything, I growled at him. Skylar was with me all night. The officer sucked his teeth. Sure, boy. I guess we'll see. Until then, I'll just keep an eye on him. I gritted my teeth, but my dad spoke before I did. Are you charging him with anything? No. We just wanted to bring him in for questioning, the officer replied, his brown eyes looking Skylar up and down. I didn't know he'd have such an issue with the law. Then again, he is from Edgewater Reform School. Don't talk about him like he's not in the freaking room, I snapped. You've got nothing on him and decided to terrorize him for no goddamn reason. If you say so, the officer shrugged like I wasn't worth wasting his breath on. But we just want to do our due diligence here, to rule out any foul play. I thought you said it was a suicide, Coach Sullivan demanded. How can you say that and then say there was foul play? An angry flush covered the officer's cheeks. We're just making sure is all. From the crime scene, it looked like a suicide, but we won't know for sure until forensics come back with the autopsy. This ain't a cut-and-dry case. Sounds like it is to me, Coach Sullivan snorted. It also sounds like you just want to terrorize this poor kid just for sport. He wasn't there. He didn't see anything. Again, the officer sniffed, clearly agitated. We don't know for sure. Yes, we do, a voice said, and everyone turned toward the screen door as it clicked shut. Evelyn Grant stepped into the house, looking as frazzled as a wind-blown leaf. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, but loose strands stuck out like they had a mind of their own. She wore a gray suit that was wrinkled, as if she'd been running around all day. Her eyes darted around the room, searching frantically until they finally settled on Skylar, and she let out a small sigh as if seeing him brought her some relief. Who the hell are you? The officer asked. I'm Superintendent Evelyn Grant from Edgewater Reform School, she replied, slightly breathless. She calmly walked over to the TV and turned it on. The screen flickered to life just as Rick appeared, standing before a throng of reporters, his expression tense but composed. The reporters' voices surged, overlapping like rabid dogs as they shouted questions. Rick, Is it true Rebecca Coleman's death was a suicide? What about the documents found in her apartment? Can you comment on the connection to District Attorney Jack Reed? Rick raised his hand to quiet the crowd. I'm ruling Rebecca Coleman's death as a suicide, he announced, his voice firm, but a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. She died by her own hand. However, that's not the end of the story. The reporters fell silent, hanging on his every word. When we searched her apartment, we uncovered documents that link back to foreclosure and legal agreements signed by Jack Reed, the District Attorney of Texas. It turns out that in a desperate attempt to maintain her social standing in the community, Rebecca remortgaged her house and all her properties, placing them in a trust managed by Reed. What she didn't realize was that, legally, those properties were signed over to him if she defaulted on any of her loans. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the reporters, but Rick continued, unfazed. That's speculation. Until we have the details, we won't know for sure. Good day. The scene abruptly cuts to Jack Reed, striding out of a building, every inch the picture of power and control. He was dressed to the nines in a crisp black suit, his slick hair gleaming under the harsh lights. His shark-like smile never wavered as he faced the barrage of cameras. Mr. Reed, a comment. Just one comment, please, regarding the accusations about you, a reporter called out. Jack Reed paused, his smile softening into a look of practiced sorrow. I'm deeply saddened by this news. Rebecca Coleman was a dear friend of mine, but to all those who are speculating, I say this: step aside and let justice take its course. With that, he swept past the reporters, ignoring the continued shouts for answers. The camera lingered on him for a moment before cutting back to the newsroom. Well, there you have it, folks, the anchor said, her voice strained as she tried to maintain a professional tone. Questions remain about the district attorney's involvement, but for now, the official ruling is suicide. Evelyn turned off the TV, her face tight with concern as she glanced at Skylar. The room was thick with tension until the officer sprang into action. Damn it, he hissed. Don't go anywhere. He pointed at Skylar and then stormed out of the room. I heard him jump into his car and burn rubber as he fled Coach Sullivan's driveway. My dad looked oddly disturbed, and something strange was churning in my gut. Why did this feel too easy? I looked at Skylar, who had a bored expression covering his face, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Well, Coach Sullivan said, I guess that takes care of that. Who wants pizza? I nodded, and he went to order some. Evelyn didn't speak to Skylar, but they shared a look, and she gave him a curt nod. There was a soft knock on the door, and then suddenly Mo was rushing forward and almost tackling Skylar in a bear hug. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held him tight, her arms shaking. A strange sense of jealousy came over me as I stared at them, but I tried to stamp it down. Mo was his best friend now. He'd made that clear the second time we met. Are you okay? She asked, cupping his face. Skylar nodded, but there was a storm building in his eyes. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her outside toward the balcony. My dad sat down on the couch, along with Ms. Grant and Coach Sullivan, but curiosity was gnawing away at me, so I headed outside. The golden hues of the setting sun drenched the lawn, and down near the curb, I saw Ace, Ty, Edge, and K-Dog waiting beside Ace's BMW. K-Dog was gesturing wildly while he spoke to Ace about something I never noticed before, but he also had blonde hair and tattoos covering his arm. They weren't as extensive as Skylar's, but they were prominent enough. The smell of smoke drifted to my nostrils, and I saw Skylar and Mo huddled together at the end of the balcony, standing so close, their noses almost touched while they whispered to each other. The sight of Mo and Skylar leaning close, whispering to each other, sent a pang of jealousy through me, sharp and unavoidable, like a thorn beneath my skin. The way they acted always made me wonder if they were really friends, Maybe something else was going on. Mo lifted her hand and gently tugged on Skylar's earlobe, causing him to laugh. So it seemed whatever they were arguing about before was resolved. I went back into the house. Coach Sullivan ordered pizza for everyone, and I watched quietly as Skylar's friends fussed over him, throwing around jokes and insults to lighten the mood, while Mo stayed wedged to his side. It was irrational to feel jealousy over that. Mo had been there when I hadn't been. She'd pieced Skylar together after Mason and I had destroyed him. Yet the longer they stayed together, clinging to each other, the more jealousy made a knot tighten in my chest. It was getting late, though, and Evelyn was the first to say her goodbyes, followed by Skylar's parole officer and then my dad. I asked Coach Sullivan if I could stay the night, and he nodded. Ace signaled to the rest that she was ready to go and hugged Skylar tight, as did the rest of them, but Mo was reluctant to leave. "Do you want me to stay?" she whispered to him. "I'm staying," I announced, causing their heads to turn. "I'm sure he'll be safe." The anxious light in Mo's eyes dimmed and was replaced by something else, something that almost made my skin crawl. "Safe? With you?" She turned to Skylar and he gave a disinterested shrug. "Fine, I'll call you later." She kissed his cheek and then walked out. Skylar kinked a brow at me, then pivoted on his heel and walked back to his room. I followed after him, almost helpless, and the door clicked shut behind me. His room was interesting, to say the least. The furniture looked like it had been pulled straight from a bad 70s movie. Orange and brown patterns that hurt my eyes. Skylar's stuff was crammed into a garbage bag, with some of his books haphazardly tossed on a desk that seemed ready to collapse. I stared around, half wondering who this room belonged to before. Coach Sullivan's life was a mystery, and honestly, why own a house if it was just going to look like this? Skylar unbuttoned his shirt and then pants. He crawled into bed, placing an arm behind his head, and stared up at the ceiling, his expression blank. I walked around the room, picking up things here and there. Why does Coach have a house? I wondered aloud. I don't know. Self-inflicted torture? Skylar deadpanned. He said his wife and son never visit. Oh, I didn't even know he was married. Do you think she left him? It would explain his surly attitude. I don't know. Probably. It's not my business anyway, he said. I turned to stare at his broad chest, seeing the tattoos that painted his torso and how thick and rippling his muscular form was. My throat went dry and heat crawled over my face. I wanted to lay down beside him, but with Coach in the next room, maybe we should cool it. My thoughts wandered back to Mo and how freely she had touched Skylar. And I took a breath, then started taking off my shirt. I crawled into bed next to him and laid my head on his chest. Skylar froze and I turned to look up at him. Is this okay? He relaxed infinitesimally. Fine. Something about his mood seemed off, like he didn't want to be here. Did Mo say something about me? Did he want me to leave? My thoughts whirled, and I was just about to pull away when his hand cupped the back of my neck, drawing me closer. I sighed a relief and leaned up to kiss him on the lips. Skylar's mouth was hard and a bit cold, but he kissed me back and then pulled away. Today was crazy, I whispered. Skylar grunted. Do you think Jack Reed had something to do with it? I asked mostly to myself. It's so bizarre that she would hand over her property to him. I wonder why she would risk it. Skylar's mouth thinned. Me too. Do you think Mason's knows? Or Lavinia? They seemed pretty clueless when I saw them earlier today. You were with them. Skylar's eyes snapped to mine. Yeah, that's how I heard the news. Mason told me. So you hung out with them, Skylar said, but his voice was dangerously low. Mason said he wanted to talk to me, I said. That's all. Lavinia was there too, and EJ and Jordy. Skylar's mouth twitched and a low laugh tumbled from his lips. Of course they were. Shouldn't I? I mean, I wouldn't have known you were in jail if it weren't for them. But while I was in jail, you were with them, Skylar replied, his blue eyes flashing with rage. How's the little princess these days? Still dazzling everyone with her remarkable ability to make everything about herself. Something like that. Then again, her mom just died, so I guess it is about her. I trailed off. Anyway, you should press charges against her for saying you broke into her house. And you're so sure I didn't, Skylar replied, his voice hard. Of course not. You were with me all night. The words died in my throat, and I turned to look up at him. Skylar's eyes were a twisted carnival of madness, gleaming with a manic light that sent chills racing down my spine. Right? He turned slowly, pressing me down into the mattress while he hovered over me. Thank you, Hunter. You always were a good little pawn. My breath caught. What's that supposed to mean? Whatever you want it to mean. So, you weren't at my house the entire night, I demanded. Were you awake the entire night? Skylar, I snarled at him. Be serious. What happened? Why did you make me lie to the police? I didn't make you do anything, Skylar replied, his mouth curling into a smile. You charged in there and started running your mouth. What? I was stunned into silence, staring up into his cold eyes. It was almost as if a switch had gone off and he was a completely different person. Yes, I had gone there to tell them Skylar couldn't have been there. But what if he was there? What if the CCTV scans came back and he'd left my apartment that night? But why would he go there? Did he have something to do with Rebecca's death? Why? I thought about it for several moments, and I took a shaky breath. Jack Reed. This had nothing to do with Rebecca Coleman. This was all because of Jack Reed, the attorney who put Skylar in Edgewater Reform School in the first place. Skylar, what's going on? I don't want to make assumptions, but did you have something to do with them finding the documents? Was it you who planted the evidence there? Skylar cocked his head. Enlighten me further with your unparalleled expertise. A wave of anger washed over me. Skylar, if I say yes, will you leave? Will you run and tell your feeble little entourage that their precious hero is just another Pied Piper leading them into a pit of nonsense? Is that what you're here for? I'm here for you, I hissed at him. Just tell me the truth. What did you do? Skylar's smile widened, and he leaned down, pressing a cool kiss to my cheek. This means nothing to me, Hunter. You mean nothing. You're just empty words, a fleeting shadow. You're no more significant to me than a stepping stone to greatness, or a drop in a vast ocean. I let the words coil around me and flinched when they tore apart my flesh. Skylar rolled onto his back and then turned off the light, leaving me shaking in the dark. I knew seeing Mason had been a bad idea, but he wanted to talk to me, and I was still captain of the football team. I could see Skylar's point of view, though. While he was in jail, I was with them, again. It wasn't intentional, and I wondered what I could do to prove it to him, to let him know that no matter what, I was on his side. Taking a deep breath, I turned to face him. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. You sprout so many meaningless words, Hunter. Even you don't realize that they've turned into weeds, Skylar said, then turned on his side and went to sleep.
Chapter 23. Skylar James. I ignored Hunter, leaving in the wee hours of the morning and catching the bus to my first lecture. I pressed decline on his call later that same day and deleted all of the rapid text messages he fired off. However, I couldn't ignore him when it came to practice. Even though I couldn't play due to my broken nose, Mason was still riding my ass hard that day, and I let him. Coach was the first to put a stop to it. Not that Hunter was any more useful. Whenever Hunter did try to speak to me, I stared at him blankly, itching for my switchblade. Anger was a familiar cloud I wrapped around me. It kept me sane, ready. It kept my heart hardened into iron and steel. Hunter was one of them. I was a fool to forget it. No matter how many sweet words or tender kisses were exchanged between us, I could never forget what he'd done to me. I finished practice in a mood so foul, not even Ty or Edge tried to drag me into their conversation. I caught Lavinia standing in the parking lot, waiting for Mason and his crew, and watched as she raced over to Hunter and threw her skinny arms around his neck, sobbing desperately. I wanted to gouge her eyes out. That damn harlot was screwing half the team, and Hunter still didn't know about it, and I swore he was either blind or stupid. No matter. That didn't concern me. Ace's BMW pulled up, and we all got in. Mo was waiting for us in the basement as usual, and something in my chest lightened when I spotted her. Mo took me into her arms, and I sighed, resting my head on her shoulder, while her hands moved up and down my spine in a soothing motion. "Are you okay?" I grunted, then pulled away. Travis walked into the door wearing a bright pink belly top and sweats. "So," he drawled, "what did I miss? Other than some cop trying to rearrange Skylar's face." The pain shot from my nose up through my forehead, like a hot needle stabbing through my head. It hurt to laugh, even though I wanted to. "Damn, you guys work hard without me. Rebecca Coleman." Travis whistled. "How did you manage to pull that off?" "Do you want to tell him?" Mo asked me. "Nope. The spotlight is all yours," I said, smiling. Mo handed Travis the legal documents with a small, almost smug smile, knowing the story behind them was going to blow his mind. "So, here's how it went down," she started, leaning back against the table. "Ace did her magic first," she said, casually waving her hand, like hacking into someone's life was a routine Monday. "She cracked into Rebecca Coleman's computer faster than I can make a cup of coffee. Found out the lady was drowning in debt, and not just with any creditors. Jack Reed had his claws in deep. She was pretty much one bad day away from losing everything. Ace encrypted the juiciest files and sent them off to another lawyer, one who had a real taste for cases like these. The idea was to make Rebecca think she had a way out, but it was more like handing her a loaded gun with a hair trigger." "The lawyer bit the bait," I chimed in. Of course, it didn't take long for Jack Reed to catch wind that Rebecca was trying to weasel out from under his thumb. He started threatening her, hardcore liquidation stuff. But Rebecca, she had no idea what was going on, why the sudden heat. It pushed her over the edge. She was already teetering, and those threats, they were the final straw. She ended up taking her own life. When we found out, we had to act fast. K-Dog was the one who dropped the documents at the scene, right in her house. It was a last-minute thing, but it was enough to make it look like there was some sort of struggle. But Mo paused for effect. Lavinia saw K-Dog. Lucky for us, she's not the brightest crayon in the box. She mistook him for our dear friend here. She gestured to me. Since they're about the same height and have the same hairstyle. Travis's eyes widened as he took it all in. "Damn," he muttered, shaking his head. "You guys really don't play around. And your face, Skylar, it looks like it got hit by a truck." "Not when it comes to Jack Reed," I said. "Who's next?" Everyone went quiet and stared at me. What? I think we should lay low, Mo replied. At least until you're cleared. We can strike after the next game, which is when, by the way. In a few weeks. I shrugged. Not that it matters much. We were still pretty early in the season, and Coach was too busy trying to break up fights rather than having us play. I got up from the couch and grabbed my backpack. I have some homework to do, so I'll see you all later. They nodded, and I kissed Mo on the cheek. You look tired, she said, as she walked me to the door. Why don't you have your nose broken and see how you feel afterward? I muttered. Hey, Travis called, racing up the stairs to catch up to me. Need a ride? I shrugged, said goodbye to Mo, and headed to Travis's beat-up Navy Honda Civic. The car held a strange septic smell that I knew came from his mother, and neither one of us spoke when he put a bunch of medical supplies in the back to clear the front seat. So, Travis said, pulling out of the driveway. Have you spoken to Razor? Yes, he knows. I figured as much, he replied, frowning. What should we do? Nothing. I stared out the window. At least for now. My face is a mess, so it's not like I can take on any more clients. I'll tell him soon. I just need one night of peace and quiet. Of course, Travis replied. If you need a nurse, let me know. I have excellent healing abilities. He winked. I doubt being on your knees counts as healing abilities, I said. My mouth kinked. You'd be surprised, my friend. Travis laughed. He placed his hand over mine and squeezed. I stilled for a moment, tense. Hunter's face flashed before my eyes, and I pulled away. It was ridiculous because Hunter and I weren't anything. We'd shared a few kisses, a hand job at most, but it wasn't anything too close to what I had done with Travis. Watching the scenery go by, I ignored the throbbing in my temple as it grew. I lay on my bed, staring up at the ceiling. Most of my homework was finished, and Coach Sullivan was busy in the kitchen cooking us dinner for the night. I trailed my fingers over the lightly jagged ridge of my nose and winced. Man, it hurt like hell. Rick Snowfall didn't hold back when he tried to restrain me, and I counted on the fact that he wouldn't. All those years ago, I still remember the bastard's face when he saw me in the hospital after what his son Jordy had done, his hands on his belt, mustache twitching. Jordy is a sweet boy. He didn't do nothing, you hear? He'd said the threat clear in his southern drawl. Most of the evidence had been buried. Testaments and statements synchronized by EJ, Lavinia, Mason, and Jordy that essentially said the same thing. I provoked them, so I deserved it. I chuckled and flinched when pain burst through my temple. Dangerous, violent, reckless, offender. Those words had been branded on my skin before my stitches had healed. Then my foster father was dragging me out of there and into the next county, where he effectively dropped me off at Edgewater Reform School and left with my settlement money. One testimonial would have blown the case wide open, punching a hole straight through their lies and exposing them to the sun. But Hunter couldn't remember. I gritted my teeth, gripping the blankets so tight my knuckles turned white. Hunter couldn't freaking remember. I gasped out a little laugh, feeling slightly unhinged. Hunter didn't remember, but he kissed me like he did. He breathed into my kiss and lavished it with his tongue like it was sweet nectar, forcing a strange kind of warmth to spread through my core. I'm on your side. "Zrania, I'm on your side," he'd said. I should have known better. He always chose Mason over me. Why would this time be any different? A soft knock on the door tore me out of my thoughts. "Skylar? Dinner?" I forced myself out of bed and headed out to the dining room. Coach sat down at the table in front of 2 bowls of soup. The doc said soft foods. Coach said. It was nothing more than some chicken broth and vegetables, but I didn't think I could stomach anything else. A pounding headache settled behind my eyes, sharp and constant, as if someone was hammering at my skull. I sat down. He prayed, and we started to eat. "Look, about what I said earlier," Coach muttered, rubbing the back of his scalp. "I'm not good with words and crap, but I'm sorry. You were right. There's no point in being here if I don't trust you, and there was a reason I picked you up from the shelter. I'm on your side, Skylar. If there's something you want to tell me, anything at all, I'm here." I stared at him curiously. "You read my file. I don't really need to tell you anything." "Even so," Coach said. "It was kind enough for the superintendent to give it to me. But I want you to understand that no matter what, I'm here for you. All that crap with Rebecca Coleman and the sheriff will blow over. Now eat your soup. I didn't slave away for nothing." I snorted a laugh, but winced at the pain. "Sure, Coach. Thank you. If it wasn't for him, I'd still be at the shelter or sleeping on Mo's couch. I owed him a lot, and the surly bastard wasn't so bad once you got to know him." We finished off the food in silence, and afterward, I headed straight to bed. I was half asleep when my phone started ringing. I groaned, rolling onto my side and picking it up off the night table. Hunter's name flashed on the caller ID. I turned off my phone and went to bed. "God, he's relentless," Mo muttered, her mouth twisting into a sneer, when he saw Hunter crossing the parking lot toward Ace's car. I told Mo what Hunter had told me about being with Mason and the others, while I was being arrested, of course. She wanted to gut him then and there. But I convinced her killing Hunter wouldn't be in our best interest. It didn't matter anyway. Hunter was one of them. "Hey." Hunter stopped close enough to our group, wearing a crisp white polo shirt and some jeans. The shirt stretched over his pecs, accenting his firm chest nicely, and the jeans clung to his narrow hips. "Can we talk?" I shrugged, taking a long drag of my cigarette, watching him squirm beneath my narrow eyes. "Talk." "Alone, I meant," Hunter clarified. I looked at Mo. "Hurry up. Travis is waiting for us," Mo said, shooting Hunter a dirty look. Edge, Ty, and K-Dog slipped into Ace's car, and I strolled a few distance away so that they couldn't hear our conversation. "What do you want?" I demanded. "Look, I'm sorry about—" "Yeah, you're sorry, I get it," I huffed. "Anything else?" "Why are you avoiding me?" Hunter asked. "Mason told me he needed to tell me something. That's why I was with them." "More excuses," I scoffed. "Whatever, Hunter. Do what you want." "I don't care anymore." Hunter's brow wrinkled. "I'm trying to make things right, Skylar. This isn't fair. I don't hang out with them anymore, and I'll never see them again if that's what you want." I laughed, even when the pain pierced my temple. "You're a liar." Hunter stiffened, his mouth thinning into a hard line. I stepped right up to him and got into his face. "So what? Do you think because we shared a few kisses it erases the past? Like I'll forget all about how you treated me like I was something you freaking stepped in? Anger flared inside my chest, but I hurried to stamp it down. I would not give him that satisfaction. A slow smile curled my lips as I dug my rusty knife in deeper. Besides, all we did was kiss. I'm sure you don't want your jock friends to know just how much you liked it. Hunter inhaled sharply, but pain skittered across his face. That's what I thought. Save your apologies, Hunter, I said to him while walking away. We both know they don't mean anything. I got in Ace's car, and we drove back to her house. The guys made jokes in the back seat, but I tuned most of them out. When we got to Ace's house, we watched TV and played video games, waiting for Travis to arrive, but he never did, and soon things got too late, and I had to head home. On the bus ride home, I tried not to think too much. The guys were still joking around as I left, but my mind was stuck on Hunter's sad face. It bugged me, that look in his eyes like he wanted to say sorry, like that would fix everything. But sorry couldn't fix broken bones or all the messed up things between us. My stomach twisted with that same old feeling, but I pushed it down. Didn't matter anymore. The bus ride felt longer than usual, and when it finally stopped, I got off and started walking down the street to Coach's house. The night was quiet, almost too quiet, and I was just thinking about how good it would feel to crash on the couch when suddenly I felt hands grab me from behind. What the hell? I thrashed around, trying to fight them off, but these guys were strong, and they were dressed in all black. One of them landed a punch right in my gut, knocking the wind out of me. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air, my hand fumbling for the knife I kept, but before I could reach it, they yanked me up and dragged me toward a sleek black Cadillac. I tried to struggle, but they were too strong, and before I knew it, they threw me inside. The door slammed shut, trapping me in the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as the car started moving, and I knew I was in deep trouble. Skylar. Razor's voice made my skin crawl, and when I turned, I saw Travis in the back seat. Travis's face was a mess of bruises and cuts, his left eye swollen nearly shut, with a deep purple bruise spreading across his cheekbone. His lip was split, dried blood caking the corner of his mouth. Razor's hand gripped his chin with a cruel intensity, forcing his head up so I couldn't miss the damage. Travis's face was pale, his expression a mix of fear and pain, but there was something else there too. Maybe a flicker of apology, or maybe just desperation. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, pleading silently before Razor jerked his head back down. "You've been avoiding me," Razor said. My heart lurched. "No, I got into some trouble with—" "Oh yes, I heard all about that. How 5-0 held you captive for a few hours." Razor sniffed, his greasy hair escaping the confines of the curls. "What did you say to them?" "Nothing," I blurted out. "We made a deal. Leave Travis." "Travis," Razor tisked. "The one who's been stealing from me?" He laughed. "Sweet Travis, who steals to pay for his mother's chemotherapy?" Travis was shaking, and several tears slipped from his eyes, but Razor held onto his chin in a crushing grip. "I think not." Travis yelped when his blunt fingernails dug into the bruises on his flesh. "He isn't stealing if I give him my half." I snapped at Razor, panic making my stomach knot. "Let him go. I'll work overtime, double time. Once my face heals, I'm all yours." Razor slanted his black eyes to mine. "Now, I like the sound of that." He released Travis's chin, So, we have an agreement. Whatever extra is made, it'll be accounted for. Travis nodded, his face wet with tears. Good. Razor leaned over, stroking my cheek. You know I don't like being lied to, Skylar, especially since I was the one who kept you safe all those years ago. I am the only person you can trust, don't forget that. My stomach roiled, but I nodded anyway. His large thumb brushed over my lower lip, and I knew what was going to happen next. Take Travis home. Razor jerked his head, and the goons bodily dragged Travis out of the car. Come here. I got out and climbed into the back seat. Razor cupped my face, nuzzling against my neck. Your face looks very bad. That's the only reason I'm not beating the stuffing out of you now. His hands pawed at my belt, and I felt my insides grow cold. You'll make it up to me now, won't you, Skylar? I swallowed, turning to stare at him. Sure. I said nothing when he peeled my jeans off. When it was over, I stumbled out of the Cadillac, my legs trembling so badly I could barely keep myself upright. The black car sped off into the night, leaving me alone in the empty parking lot. Hunter, Travis, Hunter, Travis, Hunter, Hunter, Hunter. The names spun around in my head like a broken record, each one heavier than the last. A laugh tried to claw its way out of my throat, but I choked it back. If Hunter knew the things I've done, it would destroy him. I started up the driveway to Coach's house, every step feeling like my stomach might turn itself inside out. The bile rose in my throat, and for a second, I thought I might actually throw up right there on the sidewalk. But I choked it down, focusing on just making it to the door. When I finally reached it, my hand shook as I turned the knob, pushing the door open. The second I stepped inside, I froze. Coach Sullivan was standing there.
Chapter 24. Hunter Davis. Cold, crushing, pressing in on me from all sides. Everything felt distant, like I was underwater, sounds muffled and far away. I could barely hear anything over the roar of it. Everything distant, like I was trapped beneath the surface. My lungs burned, screaming for air, but I couldn't reach the surface. I couldn't move. Hunter! A blistering red pain exploded over my eyes. It was as if someone had driven a spike into my skull. Images of Lavinia's maniac face, Geordie swinging the block of wood as it smashed into my head. Blood. So much blood. It was everywhere. Soaking. Saturating. I couldn't move. Stuck. In water. In blood. Hunter. Coach's voice broke through the fog, yanking me back to reality. I jolted, blinking rapidly as the gym came into focus. My heart was pounding in my chest, but now it wasn't from the drowning sensation. It was from the realization that everyone was staring at me. Crap. Practice was wrapping up, and the guys gathered around for one last huddle before heading out. Coach stood in front of us, his gaze hard on me for a moment longer before he continued talking. My skin prickled with embarrassment, heat rushing to my face as I tried to focus on what he was saying. If we win this game, Coach was saying, his voice firm and clear now, and keep winning the next few, there's going to be some media attention. A news crew will be coming by to do interviews about our season, and that includes Nancy Carwell from ESPN Texas. Nancy Carwell. My stomach flipped at the name, the drowning feeling threatening to drag me under again. She was a big deal, a well-known sports columnist with a sharp eye for details and a reputation for tough questions. If she was coming, it meant we'd be under a microscope. I glanced around at the guys, some of them looking excited, others nervous. My thoughts spun in 100 directions at once. This was our chance to shine, to get noticed, but it also meant that everything we did would be scrutinized. I forced myself to take a deep breath, pushing away the lingering panic. Focus. I had to focus. There was no room for screw-ups, not now. Yet when I looked up and caught Skylar's gaze, my stomach snarled into a knot. He looked away, his pale blue eyes landing in the far distance. He wasn't speaking to me, and I understood why. I was filth. To put it simply, he should hate me. I hated myself. Skylar deserved more than my half-ass friendship. No wonder he ran to Mo, Ty, and Ace. They were his friends, and I was steaming crap on the sidewalk. The way his face twitched when I mentioned Mason, or the near-feral look in his eyes when I told him Lavinia had been there too, was enough to send me reeling. Why did I go when Mason called me? Why didn't I just try to find Skylar? I'm sure Mo or someone else would have known he was taken. Even so, they probably wouldn't have known as quickly as Mason had. I took a shaky breath, forcing my gaze forward. "All right, dismissed," Coach Sullivan barked. When I turned to walk away, he grabbed my jersey, yanking me back by the collar. "Not you." I stilled, waiting for him. Coach Sullivan's brow furrowed. "Okay, start talking. What's going on between you and Skylar?" My heart kicked into overdrive. "What?" "You heard me, kid," Coach said. "Are you friends or what? I didn't even know you were friends until you came to the precinct the other day." "Oh, that. Yeah, Skylar and I go way back." "Mm-hmm," Coach huffed. "Well, why don't you swing by for dinner tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." He strode away before I could respond, and I stared after him incredulously. How could I come over for dinner when Skylar wasn't even talking to me? The thought of sitting next to Skylar while he glared at me across the table was making me feel faintly ill. I sighed, then headed to the locker rooms to change. As usual, Skylar was the first one out the door, and Mason and the others hung back. "Where have you been, Davis?" Mason asked, frowning. "We haven't seen you since you fled my house after Lavinia said she reported Skylar." I gritted my teeth. It wasn't him, and she should be charged for filing a fake report. "It wasn't fake," Jordy chimed in. "It's just a mistaken identity. She can't get in trouble for that." "Still," Mason continued, "that doesn't explain your absence." I took a deep breath, realizing that this was a long time coming. I knew I could never make it up to Skylar, but Mason and I could no longer be friends. "I'm just focusing on football and school right now. I'd suggest you do the same." I swung my bag over my shoulder and left. Since I was still team captain, it was best to avoid Mason and his crew at all costs, until I could officially tell him to screw off. I didn't want to make things difficult for the other guys on the team, and we still had a long season in front of us that would probably be worse if Mason and I were at odds. I went about my daily classes, not really registering anything. For the past few days, my head has been pounding. Memories of that night Skylar was attacked, plaguing me nightly. What was happening? Was I finally remembering? I waited until my lecture was over and took the bus to Coach's house. He let me in, and I realized that Skylar's shoes were missing from the entryway. "Where's Skylar?" "Not here, obviously," Coach shot back. "Do you like chicken?" "Of course you do. I made fried chicken and grits." I stepped further into the house, the warmth from the kitchen wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. The smell of fried chicken filled the air, rich and savory, mingling with the buttery aroma of grits. My stomach grumbled despite the knots twisting inside it. On the table, plates were already set with golden brown chicken pieces stacked high, crispy, and inviting. A large bowl of creamy grits sat next to them, dotted with melting butter and a sprinkle of pepper. The food was simple, but it felt like a small refuge from the storm brewing in my head. I looked up and saw a baseball bat mounted above the fireplace. The wood was shiny, and right in the middle was the signature. Babe Ruth. "Do you like baseball?" I asked. "No, I just collect baseball bats for fun," Coach deadpanned. "You look a little pale. What's wrong with you?" Coach tilted his head. "Nothing. I just ate some bad burritos," I lied, then sat down. Coach joined me. He closed his eyes and clasped his hands together in prayer. "Bless this dish. Bless this spread. May it fill us up and keep us fed." I eyed him, not sure how to respond to that, but decided to ignore it. We dug in and I turned to Coach expectantly. "What's up?" "I'm worried about Skylar," Coach sighed. "I've been working with his parole officer to keep that kid off the streets because he has so much potential, but I think he's spiraling. Do you know anything about a black Cadillac? It keeps showing up, and every time it does, Skylar disappears for a few hours and comes back looking gaunt." "A black Cadillac?" "No, but I can ask around," I said, alarm bells going off inside my head. "Please do," Coach sighed. "That kid's had a tough life. Sometimes people fight so hard to break free from their cages that when they finally escape, they end up rebuilding the same bars around themselves." My breath caught. Do you think that's what Skylar is doing? Was he trying to alienate himself by ignoring me? By not including me in his plans? By shutting me out? I trained my gaze on Coach, feeling a strange desperation claw at my chest. The morning after the arrest, Skylar stopped talking to me. He ignored my text messages and calls, and when I went to see him in the parking lot, he was so cold, unfeeling. I thought he hated me for hanging out with Mason, but now I realized it was more than that. He was spiraling. He'd been gone so long, I didn't even know the signs to look for. "I'm not sure, kid," Coach replied. "All I know is that he's mixed up with some bad people. I don't want to tell his parole officer just yet, in case he tries to bail on me. That's why you should talk to him." "Okay, I will." Coach smiled thinly at me, and we finished the rest of the meal in companionable silence. When it was done, I asked to use the bathroom before I left, and Coach nodded. Walking down the old corridors, the wallpaper slightly peeling with age, I noticed how the rug felt soft and comfortable beneath my feet. I was just about to head into the bathroom when something caught my eye. Coach's bedroom door was slightly ajar, and a file lay open on the table inside. Curiosity gnawed at me. I looked back down the corridor to make sure I wasn't followed, then slipped inside, my heart pounding. It was Skylar's file. Bile crawled up my throat as I gently flipped it open. My breath caught in my chest as I stared at the images of a 16-year-old Skylar. His torso was matted with thick bruises and welts, the marks of a brutal past etched into his skin. Beside the hideous photos were records from social workers. I frowned, realizing Skylar never told me they had come to visit. As I checked the dates and times, a sickening realization washed over me. They visited regularly, but each time Skylar refused to go with them. He refused to leave. Why would he do that? Why wouldn't he just go with them? Then again, if he left, where would they take him? All the blood rushed to my head as I stared at the images. He'd been brutalized for sport. God, I hated his bastard foster father. My fists clenched at my sides, the room spinning slightly as the anger and sorrow transformed into a suffocating whirlpool inside me. How had he endured this? How had he stayed silent about it? The thought of Skylar going through that kind of hell, alone and refusing help, made my chest tighten painfully. I couldn't stay here any longer. I needed to get out, to breathe. But more than anything, I needed to find Skylar. I had to know why he'd kept this hidden, why he'd stayed when he had the chance to leave. I was just about to leave the room when something else caught my attention, and my frown deepened as I turned the page. It seemed Skylar also had a long history of substance abuse and ended up being caught turning tricks with one of his friends. Although the friend wasn't mentioned, I think I could guess who it was. I closed the file with trembling hands and quietly slipped out of the room, heading back down the corridor. Coach was waiting for me in the hallway. "Nancy Carwell will be doing an expose in the next few weeks, so you better play your ass off until then. We still have to make it to the state nationals, got it?" "Yes, Coach," I muttered, my throat feeling dry. He nodded, and I bid him good night, heading out the door to catch the last bus home. Arguably, I could have waited for Skylar to return and confront me about everything that I saw, but I let it simmer in my veins. It was all my fault. If I had just stuck up for him or freaking remembered what happened that night, then things would have been different. I dug the heel of my palm into my eyes and sighed. I couldn't confront Skylar about this. It was a huge invasion of his privacy. Then again, what could I do? I thought back to the file, and images of Skylar being a rent boy turned my stomach. Was it true? Was that what he was doing? Is that why he broke things off? My heart hammered, and suddenly, explosive rage filled my core. They turned him into this. They destroyed his life. No wonder he hated anything to do with them. Had they not ruined everything, Skylar would have been my brother. Then again, I too was partially to blame because of my own pathetic selfishness. I curled my hand into a fist. I had to do something. I had to fix things and put things right. But how? Then it hit me. The only way I could help was by going to the one person Skylar would listen to, the one person who knew him better than anyone else did now. Mo didn't trust me, so I couldn't just waltz up to her demanding answers for Skylar. I had to wait. I had to watch. I noticed she came around after every practice to pick Skylar up with Ace and the rest of their crew. They would then disappear in a black BMW to a townhouse I assumed Ace lived in. I followed them one day to see where they were going, and noticed Travis showed up too most times. I knew Skylar was plotting something, but I was never privy to what, and I wondered what all these people from Edgewater Reform School had in common. Why were they willing to help Skylar? It just didn't make sense to me. I gave Skylar some space, deciding to focus on school and football. We had a game coming up, and I wasn't about to lose this one to the same foolishness as last time. We needed to play, to win. Mason left me alone most days, but I could tell every time I avoided him, it was starting to grate on his nerves. Good. I was done with them. Time flew by, and suddenly it was game night. The stadium roared like a living beast, the sound of the crowd crashing around us as we faced off against the White Panthers. The air buzzed with energy, and I felt every bit of it fueling my resolve. My focus was razor sharp, every stride driven by the need to win. Mason and the others felt it too. Their moods had shifted, and we all knew what was on the line. If we didn't win, our losing streak would continue, and that wasn't an option. When I hiked the ball, everything else faded away. We fell into play, our movements quick and precise, each of us pushing hard against the Panthers. The game was brutal. Every hit was a jarring reminder of how much was at stake. But we didn't back down. We couldn't. The Panthers fought hard, but we fought harder. Every yard we gained felt like a victory, every tackle a small triumph. As the clock ticked down, our tenacity only grew stronger. We weren't just playing to win. We were playing to prove something, to ourselves and to everyone watching. And then, with one final crushing drive, we broke through their defense and scored the winning touchdown. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but all I could feel was the rush of victory. We had done it. We had won. The crowd went wild, their cheers echoing through the stadium like a living wave. We had done it. We'd beaten the White Panthers, and if we kept this up, state nationals was within reach for sure. I was breathless and sweaty, the adrenaline still buzzing through me. The guys pounced on me, jumping up and down, hollering with excitement. I laughed and grinned so wide my cheeks ached, but as I scanned the crowd for Skylar, My stomach twisted when I saw he wasn't looking my way. I wanted to close the distance between us, to make sure he was okay, but I knew he needed his space. He'd talk to me when he was ready. I spotted Mo in the stands and knew it was time for a chat. I started heading her way, but before I could get far, a news crew thrust their camera in my face. "Hunter, great game out there," one of the reporters shouted over the noise. "You threw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns tonight. How does it feel to be the star quarterback leading your team to victory?" I smiled, catching my breath. "It feels amazing. The team worked hard for this win, and it's all about teamwork. We executed our plays well, and everyone gave it their all." Another reporter jumped in. "You've got a sit-down interview with Nancy Carwell from ESPN Texas coming up. How excited are you for that? What do you think she'll ask you?" "I'm looking forward to it," I said. "Nancy's a great sports journalist, so I'm sure it'll be an interesting conversation. We'll see what she's got in store." "Any thoughts on how this win might impact your future games?" the first reporter asked. "It definitely boosts our confidence," I replied. "But we've got to stay focused. Every game is a new challenge, and we need to keep our heads in the game if we want to make it to state nationals." "Thank you." I squeezed out of the crowd and headed straight for the stands, but when I finally looked up, I noticed she was gone. Damn it, I'd have to catch her anyway. I hurried to change out of my gear and shower. Luckily, I spotted her with Ace and Travis standing near the metal fence, waiting for Skylar. "Can we talk?" I blurted out, not caring that she was in the middle of a conversation with Travis and Ace. Mo paused, then narrowed her eyes. "I have nothing to say to you. Please, it's important. I wouldn't... Please," I said. Mo's lips pinched and she nodded, turning away from her friends. We walked around the corner before she stopped, her arms crossed over her chest. "You better make this quick, Hunter, or else." "Is Skylar a rent boy?" Her color drained like the warmth of dusk disappearing, and her jaw slowly dropped. "What?" "You heard me," I swallowed. "Is Skylar..." God, I couldn't even say it. To read that he'd been forced into it was enough to turn my stomach. It would explain why we haven't done more than kiss and touch, why he kept me at arm's length, why he... I took a shaky breath. "Please tell me." "What have you heard?" Mo stuttered. "I read his file," I admitted. "It was by accident. I didn't mean to just... What can I do? How can I help him? How can I save him?" I wanted to demand. Mo's shock slowly disappeared. "You can't. It's his choice. I told him not to, that he shouldn't get mixed up with Razor and his crew." "Razor? Is that the guy in the black Cadillac?" Mo looked around. "Be quiet," she hissed. "Do you know who he is? He's freaking dangerous." Mo released a harsh breath. "I can't get through to Skylar. He won't take my help, and he won't touch the settlement money. He won't listen to anyone. We need to tell someone," I decided. "Anyone. Coach Sullivan, his parole officer." "Wow, so you are stupider than you look," Mo deadpanned. "If you go flapping your big fat mouth, you'll get Skylar in even more trouble. Razor watches him, so get that through your big fat skull," Mo said through gritted teeth. "I'm working on it, just... Don't tell him you know anything. It'll make things worse." Loud voices sounded like they were coming closer. "I've got to go." She walked away before I could say another word. Razor. The name alone made my blood boil. My hands clenched into tight fists, knuckles white with rage. So that was the monster with his hooks sunk deep into Skylar. A fierce, burning fury ignited inside me. I could feel the heat of my anger fueling every inch of my being. The image of Skylar, trapped and tormented, twisted my insides. Razor's shadowy grip was suffocating him, and it drove me mad. I would tear through every barrier Razor had put up. I would fight, claw, and shove my way through to free Skylar. The storm inside me was relentless, and nothing would stand in my way. I was going to fight for him, no matter the cost. Chapter 25. Hunter Davis. I woke slowly that morning, staring up at the ceiling and listening to the low hum of the city around me. The cupboards made a loud creaking noise whenever my dad opened them, the smell of sizzling bacon mixed with kerosene. The interview would start in a few hours, and I felt numb all over. Images of Skylar, half beaten to death by his foster father, haunted my thoughts, sending a cold wave of dread through me. The weight of helplessness settled in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Why did he stay for so long? Why didn't he ever leave? And God, I treated him like steaming hot crap the entire time. I hated myself for it. "Hunter, food's ready," my dad called. I rolled out of bed, moving almost on autopilot as I showered and changed. My heart was in my throat, just thinking about seeing Skylar again. I wanted to tell him that he was safe with me, that I would never hurt him ever again in this life. I'd never see Mason or the others again, if that's what he wanted. My dad ironed out my tux and left it on my bed. I stared at it for several moments before getting dressed in my regular clothing. My dad was just setting a plate of food on the table, already dressed in a beige suit and black tie. "Why aren't you dressed yet? We're going to be late." "There's something I need to do first. Can you bring my suit to the newsroom? They'll have to do sound check and everything before we go on the air." My dad frowned at me. "What's going on? You've been off lately." "How would you know? You're barely here," was my first thought, but I stamped it down. "I'm fine. I just need to see Skylar for a moment." "I thought the whole team was going to be there," my dad replied. "I want to talk to him alone. I won't be long." I grabbed my keys and headed out the door before he could say anything else. Running toward the bus, I managed to catch it before it left the curb. I stared out the window, trying to gather my thoughts. I had no idea what I was going to say to Skylar. I just knew I had to see him before the interview with Nancy Carwell. The bus pulled up the curb, and I got off at Coach Sullivan's house, but frowned when I didn't see his car in the driveway. Then it hit me. He said he was going to the newsroom early that day to make sure the entire team was there. I chewed on my lower lip and was about to turn around and head back to the bus stop when I saw a sleek black Cadillac parked on the street. My blood went cold. I sprinted toward the house, my heart slamming against my ribcage, and I tried to peer inside. The living room was empty, but inside the kitchen, the tables and chairs were knocked over, almost as if there had been a struggle. No. God, no. I ran to the back, lifting up various pots, praying that Coach was old school, and left a spare key lying around. I nearly collapsed when I found it and used the key to open the back screen door. There were muffled sounds coming from the bedroom. The cries of pain were muted, as if they were coming from behind a thick wall, barely reaching my ears. A strange squelching noise, a grunt, a groan. It all felt like a rusty dagger sliding into my ribcage and piercing my lungs. I lifted the baseball bat off the wall, gripping it until my knuckles were white, and crept around the corner. A sickening thud filled the air, almost like raw meat slapping against stone. My heart almost dove to my feet, but I rounded the corner and stopped dead. Belt buckles scraped against the floor, rustling clothing. Skylar's bloody face split with a manic grin. His face slammed against the wooden table like a watermelon smashing on concrete. The man's head turned, a snarl twisting his lips. And I swung. It landed with a crunch. His head swung to the side, and his entire body jolted before hitting the ground with a resounding thud. I gasped, eyes burning, hands trembling. There was a voice in my ear, calling, screaming at me, and then Skylar's face was filling my vision. "Hey! Hey! It's me. Let the bat go, Hunter." "He was hurting you," I gasped out. I'm fine. Skylar eased the bat out of my grip. God, there was so much blood. Bile crawled up my throat, and I almost retched from the sight. Get out of here. Blood was seeping into the carpets. Listen to me, Hunter, Skylar's voice shrilled. I'll tell them it was self-defense. I'll tell them everything. Just get out of here now. I can't leave you. My voice sounded strange, foreign. I spoke as if my tongue was filled with lead. There's no point in doing the interview. They'll arrest me before I could even get a word out. What does football mean to you? I balked at that. Skylar, this isn't the time. What does it mean to you? Skylar demanded. I'll tell you what it means to me and everyone else that comes from nothing. It means freedom. It's not just about us anymore. It's about the idea that we are stronger together than apart. This team isn't just about scoring goals or winning games. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we embrace connection over division, purpose over ego. Ty, Edge, and the others, they've earned the chance to be part of something bigger. Don't let your doubt take that away. Let them experience what it means to transcend, to be unstoppable. But they'll arrest me. Let them arrest you, Skylar snarled at me. But you do the goddamn interview. Finish what you started. Show them that even if you fall the Granite Peak, gladiators will still live on. We play for glory, or we fall into the shadow of defeat. Skylar, I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't want to leave, but people were waiting for me, depending on me. This was the biggest interview of the season. If we missed it, those guys would miss their chance. Media endorsements could change everything for players, especially with NIL rights. Athletes can earn real income, which might provide stability, particularly for those from less affluent backgrounds. It's not just about money, though. Endorsements build visibility, making players more marketable and helping them establish a brand that could last beyond college. The connections they make with businesses and marketing professionals can open doors, too, and they'll gain skills in public relations and contracts. Of course, it's a balancing act. Managing academics, athletics, and endorsement obligations is tough, and the spotlight brings pressure. But the opportunities outweigh the risks. Strong endorsements can even make a player more appealing to recruiters and professional teams. The potential here is enormous, and it's hard not to think about what that could mean for the team, their futures. Skylar was right. I couldn't think about myself. No, Skylar laughed, but the entire left side of his face was busted and bloody. A blood vessel had burst, turning the entire eye red. You saved me. Now go, please. I shook my head. There was no way I was leaving. Sheer terror overwhelmed me, as if I were falling into an abyss with no end in sight. The interview starts soon, Skylar said. You have to be there. The team needs you there. I'll clean up here, and then you can come back. Please, do this one thing for me. I promise I'll see you later. The team. For most of these guys, it was the first chance on TV, and I would ruin it for everyone if I didn't show up. If we missed this chance, our football careers would be on the line, and I couldn't risk it. Are you sure? I asked, shaking. I'm fine, Skylar lied. I grabbed his shoulder and dragged him into a tight hug, squeezing him with all my might. Skylar tensed. A tremor rolled through him, and he then relaxed, patting my back. Get out of here. I fled. I moved on autopilot, my heart thundering in my ears. I don't remember catching the bus or arriving at the newsroom. Everything blurred together as if I were floating through a fog. I sat in front of Nancy Carwell with the team behind me, all dressed in their suits and ties. My gaze was locked on my hands, my mind replaying images of blood, Skylar's face, and the crimson pooling around my feet. The guys went on, and each of them answered questions one by one while I was the last. There were family and friends in the audience, and I saw Mason, EJ, and Jordy, all smiling with pride on their faces as Nancy asked them questions. "Next up, our favorite quarterback, Hunter Davis." Nancy's voice cut through my daze, and before I could think I was on stage. "You guys were on a bit of a losing streak at the beginning of the season," she tisked, eliciting laughter from the surrounding crowd. "Can you tell us what happened?" I kept my eyes on my calloused hands, ignoring the frantic pounding of my heart trying to escape my chest. The lights were unbearably hot, sweat trickling down my spine. A deep scar ran from my thumb to my elbow, starkly white and discolored. I tuned out the murmur of the crowd, focusing solely on my breaths, slow and steady. In and out and in. Panic surged through me, each breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The room felt like it was closing in, the lights blazing too hot, making my vision swim. I could see the blood, thick and dark, flooding my sight. I'd killed someone. The realization crashed over me like a wave, leaving me breathless. My hands trembled. The laughter and questions from Nancy and the others faded into a distant hum, drowned out by the pounding of my heart. All I could see was the blood pooling around my feet and Skylar's face etched with pain and fear. The room seemed to tilt, my vision blurring as panic clawed at me. I was losing control, the weight of what I'd done pressing down on me. I tried to swallow, to pull myself back to the present, but the horror kept pulling me under. The blood was everywhere, filling my mind with a suffocating dread. It was the second person I've killed, including Skylar. "Hunter?" Nancy asked, frowning. They were all waiting for me. "Focus. Breathe. Do it for Skylar." "Look, Hun, if you aren't going to talk then—" "I'll tell you," I interrupted, making her freeze. The crowd held their breath. Someone ran up to my father and whispered something frantically in his ear. He turned to me sharply, his eyes widening in alarm, and I could practically hear my father blowing a gasket as I continued the interview. "I'll tell you everything." I paused, then forced myself to continue. "It all started the day I killed my best friend." Nancy looked startled. "I meant the game. He was alive and I killed him." Nancy laughed hysterically, then made a slicing motion over her throat, signaling to cut the interview short. "Well, that's all we have time for today, folks. Tune in next week for more." Sheriff Rick Snowfell stormed into the newsroom, his gaze like a storm ready to break. I could feel the weight of his stare, a grim promise of what was to come. I knew this was it. I was going to jail for murder. The realization was oddly calm. Given the hell Skylar had endured for me, it felt right, like the universe balancing itself out. He had been worth every moment, every sacrifice. The sheriff moved toward me, and I stood still, saying nothing as they forced their way through the crowd. Sheriff Snowfell's voice cut through the noise as he began reading me my rights, the words harsh and final. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around my wrists, each click echoing the finality of it all. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." I looked around at the faces in the crowd, seeing their shock and their curiosity. But it didn't matter. The fight for Skylar had begun, and that was what mattered. I was finally taking a stand for him, for the pain he had suffered. As the sheriff guided me out, a strange sense of peace settled over me. There ain't no justice in Redstone Creek. But for Skylar, I vowed there would be. End Book 1. The Quarterback's Fate Book 2. Chapter 26, Hunter Davis. Heavy dewdrops of rain pattered against the large cell windows. It came in a drizzle, followed by a deluge. It increased until it was seething and sizzling, searing the mist and tearing into it like silver bullets. I watched on the other side, staring up at the 6 feet by 4 prison cells, the walls, and the thick gray stone with a single barred window as the only source of light from the outside world. The air was dank, smelling faintly of festering sewage from the toilet near my bed, and the window let in a draft that seemed to spread around the room like a cool mist. There ain't no justice in Redstone Creek. The bed was a plank of wood on legs. There was no mattress, no cushioning, and only one thin cotton blanket that barely fit over my massive form. It was either suffocatingly quiet or pierced with the screams of tortured inmates, or the hard clank of batons slapping against the bars and smashing against the inmates' heads in order to silence them for good. I was still dressed in my suit from the interview, the crisp button-up wrinkled from lying down for most of the day. "He was hurting you." My stomach seized at the words, the revelation trying to inch its way up my throat. Skylar's bloody face split with a manic grin, his face slammed against the wooden table like a watermelon smashing on concrete, a large hand gripping his hip, holding him down while he... God, I couldn't stomach it. I'd seen it all, first with disbelieving eyes, then with a blistering red haze clouding my vision. My thoughts fractured like glass under pressure, each shard a sharp edge of dread that cut deeper with every heartbeat. And then I acted. Skylar had been defenseless, his entire body immobilized while the beast raged on top of him. I'd killed a man in cold blood. I had smashed his head as if it were a ripe coconut, splintering the skull until it lay shattered on the carpet, fragments scattered like broken shells, brain matter slowly oozing out in dark rivulets. "Hunter! Hunter!" Skylar's voice had shrilled. "Get out of here!" And I'd fled. The questions piled up in my mind, each one sharper, more horrifying than the last. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out everything else. How long has this been happening? My breaths were shallow, coming too fast. I couldn't catch them, couldn't control them. Images of Skylar flashed before my eyes, of his wide eyes, his silence, his forced smiles. I hadn't seen it, hadn't known. The tremor in my fist spread, crawling up my arm and tightening around my chest until I could barely stand under the weight of it. I ran a hand through my hair, but it did nothing to ground me. Why didn't he say anything? How many times had I missed the signs? "Davis!" A voice clipped from the other side of the bars, and my head snapped up. "Your counsel has arrived." With my chains rattling, I was led down a labyrinthine corridor, each turn more suffocating than the last. The prison walls loomed high, damp with grime, casting hulking shadows that twisted like grasping hands. The floor was uneven, littered with cracks and dark stains that hinted at long-buried horrors. Flickering lights cast an eerie glow, illuminating jagged walls that seemed to close in around me. My cuffs clinked with every step as I approached a heavy door. Inside waited a small room with a wide, cold mirror reflecting my face back to me. "Sit. Sheriff Rick will be in shortly," the officer said, then disappeared out the door. Just as I sucked in a harsh breath, the door opened and Sheriff Rick walked in, his gray hair looking thinner in the harsh overhead lights. "Hunter Davis," he whistled. "Well, I wasn't expecting to see you on the other side of the law, but ever since those delinquents came to town, I can see how it might be catchin'," he said in a Texan drawl. "Now, tell the truth now, you hear? You're a good boy. You got a good throwing arm on you, too. Just like Jordy said, it would be a real waste for you to lose it all by going to prison." "Where's my lawyer?" I said, cutting through his bullshit. I wasn't going to say a goddamn word without Mr. Mickelson present. Sheriff Rick let out an indignant snort. "Fine, let's play hardball, son." He jerked his head in the mirror, and there was some quiet shuffling before the door creaked open and in walked Jack freaking Reed. My eyes zeroed in on his massive form as he filled the doorway, his sleek black suit buttoned and pressed to perfection, every line crisp and threatening. Brown hair shaved at the sides, he radiated a chilling calmness. When I visited Mason growing up, he always wore a bull-like expression, thick arms and neck adding to his imposing presence. Yet now, as I studied him, I realized he looked nothing like a bull. He was something else entirely, a predator with the cold, cunning eyes of a praying mantis. His limbs seemed to hinge sharply, ready to spring with the swift precision of serrated claws. His shoulders jutted at unnatural angles beneath the fabric, his stiff stance holding a terrifying, calculated stillness. Jack gripped the folder in his hands, fingers curling around it like raptorial claws holding fragile prey. His eyes pinned me as if I were already ensnared, a fly caught in the reach of his cold, piercing gaze, unblinking and merciless. "Hunter Davis," the low murmur of his voice curled around me, like tendrils of shadow reaching through the darkness. "Well, expect the unexpected, I always say," he laughed, but there was no laughter in his eyes. "Looks like you've gotten yourself into a lot of trouble, son." "Where's Mr. Mickelson?" I gritted out, hoping to God he wouldn't hear the frantic beat of my heart. "Oh, he'll be in shortly, but he's got to wait his turn. There's an order to these things, Hunter," Jack said with an oily smile. "Now, seeing as you are Mason's best friend and all, I'm gonna do what I can do to help. Mason ain't the brightest crayon in the box, but he's got a bright future, being a lawyer or playing football. Either way, we are deeply intertwined, and nobody wants to see a good kid like you go down for nothing." He sat across from me in the metal chair. "Now, walk me through the events of what happened." I kept my mouth shut, glaring at him. "Hunter," Jack sighed, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. I've got a dead body, a delinquent, a murder weapon. How long do you think it will take before people start putting two and two together?" I almost lunged across the table. "What the hell are you talking about? Skylar didn't do this." "How would I know that? How would the police know that? Your fingerprints are all over the weapon, and Skylar isn't talking, so it's down to you. Talk." I ran a trembling hand over my face, trying to gather my thoughts. Would they take Skylar to prison? Would they hurt him if I didn't tell the truth? This bastard had backed me into a corner and threatened me, knowing there was no way out. I looked at Sheriff Rick, who was staring down at me with a hardened expression. Air snagged in my throat, each attempted breath shallow and jagged, like it was tangled in barbed wire. Skylar was attacked. Jack didn't react, and neither did Sheriff Rick. Neither of their faces moved an inch. I took another breath, the images of what happened filling my vision like snapped photographs. Jack pushed the box of tissues over to me, and I didn't realize I was crying until tears patterned on the metal desk. I saw it." I pushed the words out. That man, I've never seen him before, but I saw his car around. He was holding Skylar down, and his face was screwed. There was blood everywhere. Skylar was laughing. "Laughing?" Jack frowned. Was he enjoying it? My thoughts stuttered to a stop. What kind of screwed-up question is that? "Skylar is a well-known sodomite," Jack continued. "Perhaps a sodomite. What the hell? He was attacked. He didn't enjoy it. So what? Just because he's gay, he isn't even a freaking person anymore," I said, my spittle flying. "Calm down, son," Rick said behind me. "That's not what he's saying. He's just trying to gain a better understanding, that's all." "So," he reached into his pocket to take out his notebook. "You said you have seen his Cadillac around before. Can you describe it to me?" I told him about the black Cadillac I saw hanging around Coach Sullivan's house that the coach told me about. I also told them about his conversation with Mo and how she confirmed that Skylar worked as a rent boy on the side. Jack took out his reading glasses and began scribbling his notes down on a piece of paper in a yellow folder. "Mm-hmm," Rick hummed. Anything else? How about Mo and his crew? Have you spoken to them about this? No, but they were all worried about Skylar. They said he'd been acting strangely, and I was worried too, I replied. He's the victim here. Please. All right, Rick clicked his tongue. Walk me through the events of that day. What were you doing at Coach Sullivan's house? How did you get in? I saw the black Cadillac parked out front, and as soon as I did, I got scared. Coach mentioned once where he kept a spare key, so I broke in through the back. And that's when you grabbed the weapon? Jack asked. No, that was after I saw Skylar. A tightness coiled around my throat, trapping my breath just below the surface, where it trembled on the edge of release. Look, my next questions might be hard, but I need you to answer them to the best of your knowledge. Did he enter him? Was it full-blown sexual intercourse? Yes, I hissed out. He was taking Skylar against his will, the definition of assault. You said this Mo character confirmed that Skylar was a rent boy, that he had sex for money. Is that right? Jack asked. How do you know he wasn't paid to do that? My blood was dangerous and close to boiling. As I said, he was freaking bleeding everywhere. I doubt anyone would be paid to do that. Humor me, Jack grinned like a shark. Humor? Where's the freaking humor in someone getting attacked, you sick bastard? I seethed. Hunter, Sheriff Rick cut in. Mind that tone, he turned to Jack. Cool it, no need for provocation. He sighed, slipping his pen into his pocket. Okay, give me a few minutes. I'll see if your story checks out and then let Mr. Mickelson in. He slipped out the door, leaving me alone with Jack Reed. Jack peeled off his glasses, his expression somber. I don't mean nothing by it, son, he said. But these are serious charges. I wanted to make sure you were confident in what you saw. Whatever you say, asshole, I thought, gritting my teeth. Mason said you and Skylar have been friends since grade school, Jack continued when I didn't respond. I can see the appeal to cover up for a friend. However, since this man was murdered, there might be an ongoing trial that could ruin your life. I think you and Kane should really consider the direction you want this to go in. Direction, I uttered, my voice dangerously low. And what direction is that, Mr. Reed? His chuckle rumbled in his chest. Hunter, don't be so defensive. I'm trying to help you. Can't you see that? I'm on your side. I snorted. Are you on Mason's side too? Is that why you beat him and his mother to a bloody pulp? Were you on Rebecca Coleman's side when she committed suicide from all the debt you forced her to pay, all the while trying to pin the charges on Skylar? You're as hollow as the echo of your own empty promises. His face transformed. Caving in on itself, his eyes were black with fury, large and glossy like that of a massive beetle. He laughed, but the sound rattled in my ears. You think I'm evil because I knock around my grown son who hasn't worked a day in his life, who acts like an entitled piece of crap and bullies others? And my wife, what do you know about her? The pompous bimbo who spent half our money on prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals to keep her in a coma for the next 10 years. You see what I allow you to see, Hunter? He stood towering over me. This town, Redstone Creek, they say it takes a man to build a village, but it takes a god to govern its soul. I am that for this town, the shepherd, the judge, the unseen hand that holds chaos at bay. Through my will, the unrighteous are caged, their defiance smothered beneath the weight of my truth. But Skylar stands outside the order. He is the jagged stone that defies the river's flow, immune to the erosion of conformity. To break him would be to deny the essence of free will itself, a paradox to the very order I impose. Jack smoothed his hair back. Skylar will turn on you. His kind always does. The delinquent is a feral wolf, and cursed is the man who trusts him. His loyalty is as fleeting as the wind, and his smile hides teeth sharper than a blade. You can never tame a beast that thrives on chaos. He'll devour you whole before you even see it coming. He reached into his pocket and tossed his business card on the table. When he does, you'll need me. If there is a trial, you will be charged with murder, and you will go to prison for life. When that happens, you'll also need me. He paused, his eyes roaming my face. Just know one thing, Hunter. Victory isn't always mine, but defeat never is. Hatred burned inside me as I watched the door slam shut. These people, these animals, all of them did this to Skylar. Forced him into a life where he had to be a rent boy, where he had to be homeless. I reached over to where his card lay and crumpled it in my fist. "The story checks out," Sheriff Rick said by way of greeting as he came back into the room 20 minutes later. I lifted my head from my arms, staring up at him. I had the distinct inkling that he knew it would before he started his interrogation. "As of now, you're free to go. No charges will be laid against you or Skylar, but don't leave town unless we have any more questions." He uncuffed me and I stood, rubbing the bitten raw flesh around my wrist. Sheriff Rick shot me a curious look, almost like he wanted to say more, but refrained. "You've got a loyal group of friends." My brow furrowed as he led me out of the room. The second we entered the main foyer of the police precinct, my breath caught. Skylar was standing there, a black hoodie tugged over his face, but through it, I could see the bruise spreading beneath his eye, reaching all the way to his temple and down his nose. His lip was split and swollen, his nose was crooked. My father, Kane, was there, along with Jordy, EJ, Mason, Lavinia, Mo, and her crew. A few guys from the team were present too. They were all standing, waiting for me, the tension from the police officers raising hell in my absence thick in the air. A sob almost tore out of me when I locked eyes with Skylar. Suddenly, nothing else mattered. My feet moved on their own, eating up the distance between us as I pulled him into my arms, burying my face in his neck. Skylar stood still for a moment, tense. Then his arms came up around my back, fists tightening in my shirt. I ripped his hoodie off, staring into his pale blue eyes, watching them water, before he quickly looked away and cleared his throat. God, I wanted to kiss him, and to chase away all the pain I saw there. But he was already stepping back. "Good to see you're okay, man," he said. "Yeah," I swallowed hard. "You too." "Hunter!" My father broke through the crowd, pulling me into a tight embrace. We hugged, and I nodded to Mason and the others standing nearby. They clapped me on the back when I got close. I wondered why Mason was here, but when I looked into his eyes, I understood. Even though he destroyed Skylar's life, he still considered me a friend. Could he change? Did he have the capacity for change? I turned just as Jack Reed and Sheriff Rick emerged from an office. They stopped and stared at all of us, and Jack's smile grew. The dark shadows beneath his eyes deepened, taking on a near-demonic quality, before he turned and walked away, with Sheriff Rick right beside him. Victory isn't always mine, but defeat never is. There ain't no justice in Redstone Creek. For once, in this godforsaken town, there would be.